Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. I am testing out a different camera. I'm actually using a feature called Continuity Camera with my MacBook. I'm still using my MacBook Pro microphone, but I think this should look a bit better than the webcam I was previously using. So I'm very glad this feature is rolled out. I got a couple features with it, but anyway, it's like a better angle as well. But of course, I wanted to talk about Model 3 ownership experience today. But of course, anything you guys bring up is fair game in case you're new. These EV live streams are, when you do lifetime interaction with people, there's so many random questions that pop up. It would be impossible for me to stick with one subject and just keep that subject going throughout the entire live stream. So sorry if we're darting around a bit, but I wanted to at least kick off the fact that over the past couple weeks, at least where I live, I should preface, I don't live in a very cold climate, okay? I don't live in a place where it snows. It barely even rains here throughout the year. It does a couple weeks out of the year. But for the most part, I live in a very, very warm climate. Certain times of the year, in the summer, it'll get over 110 degrees. Like daily throughout the week, not just once. It will like consistently get over 110. So my cold is not real cold. I know there's millions of people that live in places where it's actually cold, but for me, California cold means that you actually have to use the heater in your car. Okay, because I don't typically have to. At least throughout the ownership of my Model 3 so far has been primarily it's all hot. I'm pre-cooling the car. The car will get way past 100 degrees on the inside very, very easily. But now we're finally getting to the point where I'm using the heater in my vehicle and we have to keep warm inside the car. Again, not that I live in a cold climate per se, but for me, under 50 degrees or so is typically when it's like, oh, you actually have to start using the heated seats. And, one thing that I didn't really utilize in any of my friends' previous Teslas or try before, so I'm sorry, Mike, I'm going to have to flex on you a little bit with this one, the heated steering wheel. I've never owned or driven a car with the heated steering wheel before, and I finally got to try it out this week, and man, that is a pretty nifty feature, I got to admit. I was just like hugging the steering wheel as closely as I can, keeping my hands around the grip because I'm like, ooh, this is warm. And the seats, of course, are heated. My last vehicles, which, my last car was very cheap. It cost less than my laptop that I'm streaming with right now. That car did not come with heated seats for the front or back. Thankfully, Tesla is now, even on the cheapest model like this one, enabling heated seats for the back row and the front row. Which we have utilized driving around family and friends and stuff in the cold. They want to have their butts kept warm. So it's a little bit daunting to have to go through the settings and hit the, you got to hit the rear settings for your rear and turn it on for them because they don't have any heated controls. I don't know how complicated it would have been. I don't think you necessarily need an entire display back here like the Model S and X. But just, I don't know, like a simple little button or a toggle or something that they can push. Like, my family car growing up, we had a Chevy Trailblazer that honestly, it broke down and my parents traded it in because it was so problematic. It was not a very good car. However, that Trailblazer, had heated seats. I think just for the front row. There was no heated seats for the second row, and there was a third row as well, which of course didn't get heated seats. But when I did have the privilege of sitting in the passenger seat or in the driver's seat, I occasionally drove it, but we got rid of it shortly after I started driving, so I didn't drive it very often. But there was just a one single button. It doesn't need to be very complex, but one single button that you would push to turn it on to 3 bacons, push it again to get it to 2, push it again to get it to 1, and then push it again to get it off. I feel like that wouldn't be too complex on the interior. It wouldn't cost that much extra, but I get it. Tesla's all about the best part is no part. Best process is no process. However, if we're on the subject of the best process is no process, it's a pretty dang complicated process to open the climate settings, select rear, hit the bacons a certain number of times for the backseat passengers, and then close it again. I would like it if the backseat passenger could just press a button because then there'd be no process, right? But I wanted to answer Melon's question because he's basically, or she's basically, I don't know who, they're basically the first person to ask a question in the stream before we even started going live. And I apologize in advance if the stream gets cut out. I might have to switch back to the MacBook Pro webcam if something goes wrong. This is the first time I'm using continuity camera in the car, so it should work fine, but I don't have a power source going to the phone, so I assume the battery life will be enough to carry us through the whole live stream, but it might cut out, so I apologize in advance. I'm still kind of testing things. But Melon asks, now that you've had your Model 3 for a few months already, looking into solar panel and or battery backup yet, remembering that you were interested previously. I am definitely interested in that concept. I like the idea of it. It's just the situation we're in right now makes it rather complicated because, for one, I obviously would prefer to stay within the Tesla ecosystem. I would like to have Tesla Solar, and typically Tesla has some of the best pricing for solar as a whole, but they do not offer solar roofs in my area, which is funny because they used to. I've often played with the Tesla Solar website just to see like what the current prices are for solar, because they've fluctuated a bit. They've changed prices on Powerwalls and stuff. But in my region now, when I plug in my address, which I can't show you unfortunately, but when I plug in my address, Tesla Solar says we are not offering solar roofs in this area. Like, you can be added to a list. Because my roof is kind of old, so I'm not like in love with the idea of panels, but they're not offering solar roofs. And in terms of panels, Tesla will not put solar panels on my type of roof because I have a metal roof. And the type of metal roof I have, I've sent, pictures to them, or I let them know what kind of roof it is, and they say, sorry, it's just a weird, like, California rule or something, that they were like, if you were outside of California, we could give you panels, but because you're in California, we don't. I don't know what the policy or rule is, but I've checked multiple times throughout the years. I checked back in 2019, I checked in 2020, I checked last year, and I've checked again this year. They still will not budge on my kind of roof. So basically, the house I'm in, they don't want to do panels, and they don't want to do a solar roof, which is definitely a bit of a bummer. So I've tried to get quotes. Honestly, it's kind of frustrating. I've tried to get quotes from third-party solar installation companies, and they're not very good at it. One thing that, it sucks that Tesla customer service is known for not being very responsive, and I know Mike has had a bad, his mother, I think, had a bad experience with the solar teams from Tesla, or I think it was Tesla. But I've heard lots of bad stories, basically, about them not being responsive and not being transparent. However, one thing I like about Tesla Solar is they are very clear with at least giving you a quote before the project, or before you even put a deposit down. You don't have to give them their email. You don't have to plug in. Well, you do have to plug in an address, but they don't have to, like, get you on a mailing list and start bombarding you with spam mail and stuff. Because all other solar installations I try to check, they don't give you a quote very easily. They want you to fill out all of this personal information and give you their phone number before they even tell you how much it's going to cost. So I haven't been very happy from what I've talked to people that have gotten third-party solar installations, and they don't have that many nice things to say about the installers or the process. And of course, I want a Powerwall, but I know there's third-party battery storage as well. I guess I haven't looked too diligently into it, but the thing is, the reason I guess I'm not in a big rush to answer Melon's questions is that our Model 3 is one of the most efficient vehicles on the market. I mean, it's basically at this point the most energy efficient vehicle on the market that you can buy new. Technically, the Standard Range Plus Model 3 from 2019 and 2020, back when they were using 2170 cells, that Model 3 was actually more efficient because they were using nickel-based cathodes, which is more energy dense, which basically means the weight was lower and the battery pack was small. So it was quite a bit lighter than the long-range Model 3. And it's even lighter than this Model 3 because I have lithium iron phosphate. Now, the compromise is, yes, the efficiency was better, but the range was much worse. So you had a maximum range when you charged to 100%, when you first got the car. Back then, the range was like 240-something miles. But because it wasn't lithium iron phosphate, you had to charge it to 80% most of the time, which was actually typically like sub 200-mile range for daily driving. And the degradation was much faster because it was just a standard nickel-based battery. It was not iron-based. So I think the trade-offs are worth it. Excuse me. This car is just a little bit less efficient. It's not a huge difference. It's like the standard range plus from 2019 was like 140 miles per gallon equivalent, and this car is like 130 miles per gallon. Like, it's less than 10 miles per gallon equivalent. But I'm sure that does stack up. But the truth is, driving this car just ultimately does not cost that much relative to essentially any other vehicle on the road. My lifetime efficiency is currently around 230 watt hours per mile, something like that. That's mostly because I've been doing a lot of miles in this car, a lot more driving than we thought, actually. Just because we've kind of turned it into a shuttling service for friends and family. We've had family on both my wife's side and my side driving to and needing rides to the airport back and forth, back and forth. So I've been to the airport, which is not close by. You know, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. And a lot of that drive, the normal route we take is under construction, so we're taking a different route that is further but usually faster. But for it to be faster, you have to be driving like over 70 miles per hour. So a vast majority of my miles on this car are over 70, which is why I think the efficiency is, even for a Model 3, a little bit higher. There were people on Twitter telling me that their Model 3 was about 220 watt hours per mile. And I think it would be if I wasn't driving on the freeway so much. You know, a lot of the time I'm not driving that fast, or I'm not going on the interstate or on highways. I'm just driving around town, or if I'm driving through the city, I usually don't go much over 50. And if I was, and I check my energy consumption when I'm driving around the city, and I can easily get it to around 200 watt hours per mile. So it's the average of driving at highway speeds, plus with a lot of people and cargo in the car, that adds to weight. But all that to ultimately say, the break even point for solar is much further out with our situation, because our house does not consume that much electricity, especially this time of year when we're not running the air conditioning anymore. And we, again, don't live in a super cold climate, so we tend to get away with not running even the heater very often. And our stove, our water heater, and our house heater are all powered by natural gas, not electricity. So yes, technically we could get into finding, more heat pump or mini splits that are powered more by electricity than gas, and then we would have to invest in maybe an electric water heater or an electric stove, and try to convert a lot of our energy usage over to electricity so that we can justify getting solar. But that pushes out the break-even point. Basically, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, the break-even point for solar is like, how much money will this save us versus how much does the solar installation actually cost? And it's hard to calculate that when the third-party companies won't provide us with any actual quotes. We don't that they don't want to make it easy to know how much the solar installation is going to cost. So if it's a $15,000-$20,000 installation and we're saving roughly $150 a month, then extrapolate that out, and it takes 10 years, maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years, depending on what your energy consumption is, to break even to where the solar is actually saving you money. And we're not entirely convinced that we're going to be at this house for 10, 20 years. Probably the next 5 years, sure. But we don't have a very clear break-even point in the next 5 years with solar. So at this point, we're like, let's wait and see what our long-term plans are. There's still a lot of plans up in the air with, the housing market in decline right now. That's making us wonder, should we buy? Because once we bought the Tesla, we wanted to get back into our investment goals, which is mostly in, retirement funds and the stock market. So that's what we're focusing on right now. So thank you guys for your support, by the way, for making that happen. But yeah, I guess that's my long way of answering your question of just like, because of the house and Tesla not wanting to service our roof, and the third parties not seeming like that great a deal, doesn't seem like a great decision or investment at this point. I think I would rather invest in the stock market, or in stocks that have a lot of growth, or in stocks that have high dividends, and let that money start paying us out over time, opposed to dropping $15,000 or $20,000 on solar panels, or perhaps more. Again, I don't have a very clear quote, and hoping that eventually that saves us money in the long run. Do you use auto heated seats? I'm using one right now. I don't know if it's on auto per se, but yeah, the seat I'm sitting in right now, I have 3 bacons on because it's pretty cold outside. It's like sub 50 degrees, which for me is cold because, you know, I like wearing my t-shirts. I don't wear a bunch of baggy stuff. I know it's not really cold. I know I'm probably making a bunch of people out in Michigan cringe. Oh my God, you think that's cold? I know. I've spent winters in Spokane, Washington. I know what it's like to walk around in 0 degrees. I've driven in the snow. I know that that's real cold and this is fake cold, but for California, Drew, this is pretty dang cold. Um, I sent you a link on Twitter to some hubcaps for the Model 3. I love them on mine. Really? Okay, I'll have to check those out. I'm sorry, Donkey. I really love the aero caps, and I know I'm alone on that. Most people don't like the aero caps on the Model 3 on the 18-inch wheels, but I think they look great, and I don't want to take them off. Genuinely, I think they look better on. But thank you for asking that question. I should probably try to keep up with the chat here. Let's see. My mom's 2004 Yukon has heated second row seats. Yeah, it's not that expensive of a thing. I don't know why Tesla or any company really goes that cheap on it, but there's probably a good argument to be made that in many climates or in many parts of the world you won't use those. So if you know a lot of your vehicles are going to places that aren't going to utilize them, then uh, yeah, you live. I know Alpha specifically lives in a pretty cold climate, so I imagine most of the vehicles in that climate that have been shipped there, the manufacturers know that they're going to be in cold climates, so second row heated seats are pretty common. Maybe the Trailblazer trim that we got, because they bought it from a dealership, obviously that's in California, they assume, well, California's not going to care that much about heated seats. If you had to swap your Tesla Model 3 for any other EV in the same price range, give or take 10,000, what would you go for? If I had to swap it, yeah, I would really choose not to at this point. 10,000. So I'm not able to get a Model 3 long range because that's $11,000 more than the rear wheel drive, and I can't get a Model Y because that's like $20,000 more. So I assume you mean no other Tesla when you say if I had to swap it with any other EV. That's a good question, JSD. Thank you for asking. You know, I think I was debating this the other day. I genuinely would really like to try a Bolt just because of how cheap they are. I'm fairly confident they're selling them at a loss, but I've watched a couple reviews, and obviously it's not a luxury vehicle. It's very affordable, but the one thing I've kind of had in the back of my mind when driving around this car is like, I bought it for the efficiency and, of course, the software. I prefer Tesla's design of both exterior, interior, and software above any other EV I've ever seen. Um, so I wanted to be a part of what Tesla's operating system can do. And while I'm not very in love with full self-driving or navigate on autopilot right now, I do acknowledge that of the vehicles that will have the best autonomy features in the future, this has definitely got the hardware. Not saying it's gonna become a robotaxi. I'm just saying it's gonna outperform, like from the videos I've seen comparing online, it outperforms Waymo, it outperforms Cruise. No, it's not as autonomous as those because there's still a driver that has to pay attention. But in the long run, I think there is a greater chance of this vehicle achieving level 3 autonomous driving than any other vehicle on the market right now. I don't think Lucid is as close as Tesla. I don't think Rivian is as close as Tesla. Between the custom-made full self-driving computer. So yeah, you guys know why I bought this car. But I do keep thinking to myself, I don't supercharge very much. I've only supercharged on my road trip to San Diego. And I've been pleasantly surprised with the range to the point that I can drive to the airport and back and drive to friends' houses, which are not necessarily close by. You know, sometimes it's an hour away or an hour and a half away. And I can drive there and back without needing to supercharge. I just do over 95% of my charging from home. So with that being the case, if I'm primarily using this vehicle to drive around town and drive to friends and family's houses, which are not, that don't need the supercharging network, a Chevy Bolt would be substantially cheaper, especially if I was buying it with the federal tax credit. And they said the 2023 Bolt will start around $27,000 and still get a range roughly around 250 miles. Granted, it won't have the Tesla support, it won't have a great charging speed. But that's the thing. I'm looking at my lifestyle right now, and I'm like, in the future, I want to go on more road trips and do more supercharging, but there's just a certain amount of busyness going on and family coming in town and friends we're keeping up with. So right now, there's just not a lot of road tripping happening. So if I had to swap it out with another, I would probably choose one that I would save a lot of money on. And I think that Chevy Bolt 2023 edition would probably be, with the federal tax credit, like $20,000 and still have over 200 miles of range. I've never test drove one. I've never gotten really up close and personal with it. So I'm sure there's a lot of things I don't like. I mean, I'm not in love with the design. The interior I don't love. The exterior I don't love. But I believe it does have CarPlay, and the new Bolts do have Super Cruise at least. So I could mess around with that a little bit. But yeah, I have a hard time finding any that I would feel more comfortable with. But I think if I had to go with a non-Tesla, my motivation would be save as much money as you can. Because my next most tempting offer would be the Kia EV6 if I was looking for a non-Tesla that had a good charging speed and I would take on road trips and stuff. I would want it because, right now you can't get a non-Tesla without lithium iron phosphate. So my choice would be try to find one with pretty good efficiency and pretty good range and a pretty fast charging speed. That way you could compensate for the lack of superchargers with faster charging, which what Hyundai has come up with the, what's it called? GMP platform? Or is it GMEP? I forget. There's too many letters to keep track of, but the platform that the Ioniq 5 and the GV60 and the EV6 are all based on. All these acronyms are crazy. But of those three, all those vehicles that were built on the same platform, the Kia EV6 looks the coolest to me. I like the interior design more than the Ioniq. I like the exterior design more than the Ioniq. I have been in the Ioniq 5. I've checked it out, and it's nice. It's just styling wise, it's not quite my taste. And I think the Kia EV6 is a little bit more energy efficient, which I appreciate. But they both can do over 200 kilowatts of charging, which is a lot better than even this car. And much better than the Bolt, which is still stuck with the crappy 50 kilowatts. But that's what I often ask people when they're thinking about, switching to EVs. Because obviously it's a conversation that's popped up a lot since I've bought this car and more people know that I'm driving electric now. They ask questions about it. And I typically tend to tell them Teslas are not the first EV I recommend when someone says, I'm thinking about going electric, what should I get? The first question I always ask is, do you plan on road tripping a lot with the vehicle? If you plan on road tripping a lot with the vehicle, EV6 or Ioniq 5, I think is a really, really good choice. Or even an ID4. ID4 is a bit slower charging speed, but it's not a bad vehicle. I think it has more software limitations than the Ioniq or the EV6, but it still has a lot of cargo space, and it looks great, and it has an amazing turning radius. So just as an overall vehicle, it feels pretty luxurious, and it's pretty affordable. And the range is like 270 miles or so. So if you are planning on road tripping, I'm torn between either Ioniq 5, EV6, or ID4. Pick the one that fits your styling best. But if you're not planning on road tripping very much and you think a 200-mile range can kind of cover all of your driving needs, then the Bolt is a lot cheaper than those cars. And I just haven't got a chance to test drive one yet, but I think it would be fun. I'd like to check it out. Dorian says, but getting solar increases property value. It does and doesn't at the same time. My parents actually, I've told this story before, but my parents bought solar on my childhood home that I grew up in for the first 19 years of my life. And when they decided to sell the house a couple years ago, the realtor kind of rolled their eyes and was very frustrated when she found out they have solar. Because the company they bought the solar panels from got bought out, so they had different standards or different requirements now. And when you're selling a house, you have to provide estimates, at least in California. I don't know what it is like in your states, but if you're selling a house with solar, you have to tell them how old the roof is, how old the panels are, and roughly you have to get an estimate from the solar company how much it's going to cost to remove the solar panels in order to replace the roof. So it creates this big headache during the sale process of more permits and more quotes that you have to get. It's not just like, oh, you're buying a house? This one has solar. Oh, great. I'll pay more for it then. it's not that simple. You tend to have to figure out, okay, how many years do the solar panels have on them, and sometimes people lease the solar panels, which my grandparents have done and stuff, and it's like you have to take over the lease if you're buying the house. So often what can happen in the real estate market, I know this because when we were shopping for houses, we were noticing this between houses we were looking at that didn't have solar versus houses that did. uh, a lot of the time, the house with solar panels, they'll be asking more, but that means that people can find a very similar house to yours, same square footage, same bedrooms or similar location, same amount of bathrooms, but they'll find it for cheaper because it doesn't have solar. Which, when you're, pricing out your mortgage and trying to figure out, which house do we want to buy, a lot of people are going to take the house without solar because they would rather just have a cheaper house. The break-even point has to be factored in. So it's like sometimes people with solar will be asking for $30,000, $40,000 more just because they have solar, when in reality the value of the solar panels isn't that high, and sometimes they can be a liability. Um, yeah, Mike is explaining here because he's probably went through the same experience we did. Because he bought his Tesla before he bought his house, but so Mike is probably aware of that. Um, Even if you won't be there, full payback period for solar could make sense. It's not a 1-to-1, yeah, like what Mike is saying. It does a little bit increase the value, but not as much as you'd think. And it turns away more people from buying because they would rather just buy a cheaper house overall. We love our Aero wheel caps too. Efficiency is the way to go. Well, I prefer the efficiency, but just if we're talking purely aesthetics, just the way they look, I think they look better with the Aero caps on. I know I'm weird in that way, but Fizz Whizzle says my standard range was 2170 with a rated 264 mile range. After 33,000 miles, it's at 252. That's still really good. I'm just sure that nickel-based cathodes are going to degrade a bit faster, and you can't charge it to 100% as regularly, which I appreciate being able to charge to 100% multiple times a week, because I do utilize that range. The problem with not including a feature because the customer doesn't live in a certain climate is that the customer could eventually move to a different. It is, but you don't account for that with every single buyer. If they're moving to a different location, they might also sell the car or buy a new one. There's so many factors involved with that. Especially if people are moving to a different country or a different state. Cars tend to stick within. I know there's exceptions, but a lot of the time cars tend to stick into the region. Oh my God, there's a bird flying around in the garage. Can you guys see that? I don't know. Did he land on the car? I can't see him. I have a glass roof, but I don't know where he landed. Just a bird flew in here. That's weird. Yes, Mike, it's almost time for another Cybertruck update video. I'm still working on that. I'll probably do that later today, actually. Will you make a giveaway of the Cybertruck? Yes. I will buy a $120,000 car just to give away, because I might make $20 on that video. The channel Now You Know That I watch has a deal with Energy Pal to perhaps help you get a quote. I just wish it wasn't so complicated. I love the quote system on Tesla's website. You just plug in the address and you say your average electric bill, and they're like, okay, here's what it'll cost. Whereas every other site has you go through all these pages and you have to give them your phone number, and then they're going to text you the quote, or they're going to email you the quote. And if you don't like it, they're going to keep emailing you afterwards. It's annoying. My brother in Christ drew invert the camera. It looks like you're having your wheel on the right. Like, I'm not. The steering wheel's not here. I mean, I don't want to give away my location. Hold on. Let me. It's not inverted though. Multiplanetary species. There we go. Here, I can pick this up. Steering wheel's over there. I'm over here. Sorry, I bumped the camera. It has much more room for the laptop display, in case you're wondering why I'm sitting in the passenger side. I tried. It's honestly great having a MacBook and a Tesla, because my wife was hanging out with one of her gal friends in a nearby town, not our town, so we had to drive a little bit to visit. But, they wanted to have their little girl chat and stuff, and they didn't want me around for that, which I understand. I don't think I'd want to be around for the girl chat anyway. So I dropped my wife off at her friend's house so they could hang out and just chat for a couple hours. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to get some work done while you guys are hanging out. So I drove the car a little bit, just like 5 minutes away from her friend's house, and found a nice little park. And I had my laptop, and I just pre-recorded some tech and EV videos that I needed to get done. And I've got my fast charger up here with the 36-watt cable powering the laptop. I had my phone's hotspot, and I just worked away right here in the car. But I tried, because I had my laptop with me. I got the laptop and sat in the driver's seat. The steering wheel takes up so much space. I'd have to hold the laptop up like this. It would be very, very uncomfortable if I tried to have my laptop on my lap while I was in the driver's seat. So that's why when I'm just live streaming or recording videos, I always sit in the passenger seat. No, I didn't get a Powerwall. You can't just buy a Powerwall by itself anymore. You have to buy it with solar panels. And now they've changed the policy so that if you order a solar roof, you have to get it with a Powerwall. You cannot just buy a solar roof by itself anymore. I think that was a pretty recent change. Do you have any opinions on Tesla's new J1772 wall connector? Not a lot. I mean, it looks good. And from what I've seen compared to other third-party J1772 wall connectors, it's pretty reasonably priced. A lot of other ones that people get for their garages and homes are like thousands of dollars, and Tesla's is like 500. Of course, a lot of people were speculating, like, why is Tesla making a J1772 connector? Does that mean Tesla's going to switch to CCS soon? Are they going to make the switch? I don't think that's it. I was curious why they did it too, but most people's answer was just like, well, there's a lot of people that buy Teslas, but don't also have another EV that is not a Tesla. So if they want to charge that at home, now they have a Tesla made solution, a Tesla wall connector that can charge their non-Tesla. I don't think it means much. I don't think it's confirmation of anything. It's just like, yeah, we just figured why not offer it, because they are going to offer also Tesla has rolled out a feature where if you have a certain amount of wall connectors, you can actually charge people money to use it. So like businesses or restaurants that install connectors, which some are for Tesla, some are not for Tesla, you could have a billing system set up so that the person charging at your location is paying you for the electricity. So you could turn it into a business where you're getting paid for a certain amount of the kilowatt hours they consume. So I think there's some motivations for it, but I don't think it didn't take Tesla much time to come up with. It's probably sharing a lot of components and stuff with the Tesla wall connector anyway. But yeah, I don't have a lot of thoughts on it. I heard about Prussian blue batteries using lithium ion and cheap powder called Prussian white. The lifespan is rated at 10,000 cycles. CATL is making them, and they're also supposed to be 40% cheaper. No, I haven't heard too much about them, but I don't get my hopes up until they're actually in vehicles. There's all kinds of batteries that people will talk about for years and years and years, and then they don't turn into anything. Whether it's graphene batteries or solid-state batteries or 4680 batteries, right? Everyone talks about them and talk, and then they come out, or it's like, to me, scale is what matters above all. So I've not heard the term Prussian. I've heard of sodium, I think. I don't know if that's the same thing. But in my opinion, it's like we have proof of a scalable, effective battery chemistry with lithium iron phosphate. It's in cars. I'm sitting on a giant lithium iron phosphate battery pack as we speak. It's much cheaper. It uses materials that don't cost that much and are widely accessible. Iron is insanely common. And CATL was able to go from like no LFP batteries in Teslas to half of Teslas delivered our LFP within the span of like a year and a half. So with that kind of production ramp, I'm like, that's the future. Put everything towards LFP. If something else comes around, okay, cool, but can you ramp it as quickly as LFP? If you can, great, do it. But if you can't, then don't waste too much time on it, because ultimately trying to get the energy density up is, I don't think, the problem. I think production capacity matters above all else. Thanks for the insight on the solar panels. Gonna have this discussion soon with my bro. He's getting his new house ready. Maybe not so soon with solar for him. Solar can just be a big headache, man. I really wish it was simpler, because I love the concept, right? I love the idea. Once it's all plugged in and working and you have it all set up, I love that. I really want that someday eventually. I don't know if it's going to happen at this house or ever, because I don't know how long I'm going to be at this house. It could be a long time, might not be a long time, but at this point, because we're not entirely sure what our housing situation is going to be, we're focusing on investments and building up passive income that way through the stock market, opposed to solar, because the stock market, we can, that passive income stream we can take with us whether we have this house or not. We can benefit from it regardless. Whereas the solar is like, we might buy it and then decide we got to move later, and then having to sell the house with solar panels on it gets more complicated. At this point, no, Ivan, 4680s are not LFP. I don't think they ever will be. It's not impossible. You can do a lithium iron phosphate 4680. It's just, I don't think it would make sense to. I'm trying to think of a good example for it. It's kind of like, I don't know, making tea in a big gulp cup, like hot tea with a tea bag. Would you want to put hot tea in a, 7-Eleven big gulp cup? Or would you rather just have it in a regular mug, because that, won't burn your hands as easily, and that can keep the heat on the inside, and you can hold it from the handle, and that won't burn you as much. It's like, you could put hot tea in that cup, but it's the same thing. Lithium iron phosphate is not very energy dense, so that's why we build it currently. CATL and pretty much everybody builds it in the prismatic sense. It's big rectangular boxes, because that's the most space efficient way to get a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack in this car. Cylindrical cells are not very volumetrically efficient, because you have all this space in between the cells. That does help with the cooling, but that cooling is more beneficial to nickel-based batteries. It's not as crucial with LFP, because it's a more stable chemistry. It's not as prone to combustion or burning, because it's less energy dense. So theoretically, yes, you could do a 4680 LFP, but I don't think it makes sense to. I don't think they ever will. And I think they've mentioned that on earnings calls. They were like, at this time, there's no logic in doing that. Maybe in the future, for some reason, they'll decide that, well, the only way to do a structural battery pack is 4680, but range isn't that important with this particular vehicle, so we just want cheaper materials because nickel is too expensive and cobalt is too expensive, so let's do LFP 4680. But I don't think it'll happen. Let's see. Kia is reportedly partnering with Currently to provide emergency roadside charging for the EV6. Interesting. Emergency roadside charging. I feel like you just shouldn't have that. Like, if you're building your EVs correctly, that shouldn't be a thing you need to have. Roadside charging. To me, that sounds like you're worried about running out of range. So some truck comes up with a big battery pack and charges your car when you run out of range on the side of the road. I don't think that should ever happen. If that's happening, something's wrong. Something's wrong with the charging network, or something's wrong with the software, or something's wrong with the range. Like, you're doing something wrong if you have to have roadside charging. Let's see. J1772 connectors for small businesses, so they have a billing infrastructure that Tesla provides. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I saw another Rivian R1T in my middle of nowhere area yesterday. This time it was a limestone color. Ooh, I love the limestone. I love how many Rivians I've been seeing. Although, I should mention, I did spot an F-150 Lightning yesterday. Or was it the day before? But recently, a red one that looked pretty sweet. It went by too fast. I don't know which trim it was, but it was not the Pro. It had the full light bar on the front. But that is the third F-150 Lightning I've seen in the past 2 months, I guess. So the Lightnings are kind of catching up. I'm seeing more and more of them. Rivians are definitely more common for me in my area, but that's probably just because there's the same Rivian I see at the same parking lot every day. I drive by that parking lot kind of regularly, and every time I drive by it, I see the Rivian parked there. I want to meet that guy. I want to make friends. I want to become friends with him. Roadside charging good only for when the charging network fails you, and now you're out of juice. I would rather that time and money just go towards a charging network. I don't want roadside charging. I just want a better charging network. Do you have to pick one? I mean, the charging network getting better and more improved is ultimately going to benefit you a lot more. Roadside charging is going to scare people away from buying EVs. If they see you stuck on the side of the road because you ran out of range charging from a truck that comes up to get you, you're not going to want to buy an EV at that point. So I'd rather don't waste time on roadside charging. Just make better charging networks. And personally, that's one thing that kind of bothers me about Legacy Auto is that they've all kind of just given up and assumed that they can just rely on Electrify America for everything. Which Electrify America is not very good. There's constantly people complaining about it. It's perpetually telling people that the chargers are available when they're not, and that there's stalls available when they're down and they're dead. And the charging speed is always, from the people I've seen road tripping with Mach-E's or what have you, they're always saying like, oh, it's not charging as fast as I thought, or it said it was available and it wasn't. It's just a very crappy, buggy charging network that's really scared me away from ever buying a non-Tesla. That's frankly my biggest issue with the Rivian. I love the Rivian as a product. The design is great. I like the software. I like the interior. I like the exterior. I like the functionality. I like the size, personally. I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it again. If I was in the market for a pickup truck, I would definitely get a Rivian. I would take a Rivian over an F-150 Lightning. I would take it over a Cybertruck at this point, because I personally think the Cybertruck's going to be six figures, whereas Rivian is going to target, a $70,000 price or so, which sounds more expensive than the F-150 Lightning, but once you realize the type of Lightnings Ford is building and the dealer markups that most dealers are applying to the Lightnings, they're not, people, at least from here on out, there were a handful of people that got Lightning Pros for MSRP, but they've raised the prices, and very few dealers are sticking with MSRP at this point, based on the subreddit I'm in that follows F-150 Lightning. People are constantly getting massive dealer markups on all of their Lightning orders. It's not that much more expensive than Lightning, honestly. I think most people buying Lightnings are spending at minimum like 60 grand. Most of them more. Most of them are spending 70, 80, 90 grand because the dealers know how high in demand they are, and they know if you cancel your order, someone else is going to buy the truck. So I have heard of VinFast, Mike. They have some ridiculous battery subscription scheme. They're not the first to come up with that. I didn't know that VinFast was in favor of doing that, but I watch Monroe Live, and they were checking out VinFast, and they seem... what we call it on the EV podcast is VinFast suffers from the Blazer effect, because there's an electric Chevy Blazer coming out, and to me it suffers from the electric crossover that looks very generic and has okay specs. Nothing about it is really amazing or stands out or fantastic, and there's just dozens and dozens of electric crossovers that all have roughly the same cargo space, roughly same charging speed, roughly same range, and they all just kind of blur together, and you're just kind of replacing logos. So I don't really spend much screen time on my channel talking about them unless there's something that really stands out. And I think I've done a video talking about battery subscriptions and how I don't think it's a good idea, but someone's still trying it. But anyway, yes, I do love Rivians, and I support the company, and I love their ethos. I love their concept of adventuring and individuality, and vehicles being taken off-road, and just having no limits on where you can go. Biggest issue with the Rivian, though, it's got to rely on Electrify America at this point. Now, to be fair, Rivian is doing the right thing by building out their own network. They're building, and I follow a Twitter account that provides updates on all Adventure Network chargers. But I don't understand why Rivian's a startup, and they can afford to ramp up as quickly as they are, which has been amazing. They went from a couple thousand R1Ts to now they're getting up to tens of thousands of R1Ts and R1Ss. They're ramping the van, the Amazon delivery van, the R1S, the R1T. They're ramping them up as quickly as they can. They're growing service, and they're growing the Adventure Network, and they're a startup company. But Ford, Hyundai, Kia, VW, I guess VW is kind of doing Electrify America, but that's not going well. All these other electric, all these other legacy automakers are not building their own charging network. They're just like, yeah, you just use Electrify America, whatever. It's like, no, don't make it fall back on a network that's clearly broken. Tesla was a startup too, and they were able to make time for supercharging network and ramping vehicles simultaneously. So I appreciate Rivian actually putting the time and energy into making their own charging network, because I think that's always going to be the most seamless. You're going to get the best plug-in charge. The software will incorporate for it best with the navigation. You pull up to the charger, you plug in, it starts charging, it tells you how long you need to charge for, and then you can keep going. Electrify America tends to not be so simple because it's trying to be this universal approach, which is fine, but it doesn't always work that reliably. So anytime you try to make this universal approach that works with all these different brands, and all these brands have charge ports in different locations and software that behaves differently, and they'll blame each other, as we've seen with lots of video reviews of people saying the car says that the charging stall is at fault, charging stall says the car is at fault, and they're disagreeing with each other. That doesn't happen most of the time when you're building the car and the charger. When you're charge stall, I know. The charger's in the car's room. Yeah. Great. That's fine. You're so smart. Congratulations. Why is Lucid not building their own chargers? Probably because they're going to run out of money very soon. They're running out of cash. Not saying Electrify America is great or something, but I will take them anytime over the very incompetent chargers here locally in Malaysia we have. Well, yeah, it's better than nothing. I'm not denying it's better than nothing. But they're still very, very problematic. And my point is, Electrify America should not be the fallback for all legacy auto to not even try. Tesla's trying very hard, ramping the supercharging network as quickly as possible. Rivian is trying, and they're a startup. What's Ford's excuse? Why can't Ford start building their own level 3 fast chargers? Why can't Hyundai be building their own level 3 fast chargers? There should be more of these things growing and growing, because that's going to be the most simple and easy to understand charging network. Elizabeth says, I think Tesla also has roadside charging service. I've never heard of that. If they do, I've never seen it in use. What would they do? Would they drive a Ford Transit van out to you with a Powerwall in the back? I don't think they do. CCS sucks. Big and bulky, less durable, less capable. Why did Uncle Sam settle on the standard? Well, that's the problem in the U.S. We didn't settle on CCS. I mean, a lot of people get mad when governments want to standardize things, but that's part of the reason we want governments to standardize things, is so that we don't have this big mess of connectors, CHAdeMO, CCS, Tesla. Ideally, the government will choose the best port for the standard, which would be the Tesla connector, but instead we just chose nothing. Let's see. Legacy Auto clearly doesn't care about EVs. I saw someone bring it up. I forget their name. But I was watching an interview that Out of Spec was doing that I thought was a really excellent point, which was that Tesla works really hard on the software and charging experience, because all of the high ups, all of the executives, every board member, every chairman of Tesla, every high-end employee that's making the big decisions, that's making all the big final calls, they're all driving Teslas. So the people that make these big choices, they're experiencing the software. They're experiencing the charging. They're doing road trips too. Whereas Legacy Auto, I don't think tries as hard with the charging network or with the software, because the truth is EVs are a very small percentage of their cars sold. And I'm predicting that most of the board, most of the CEOs and most of the executives that are in charge of those big companies, they're not driving electric. Or if they do, it's only occasionally. They're like, oh yeah, see, I bought my new Mach-E, it's electric, and they just drive it around town a little bit, probably charge it from home, but they still have a dedicated gas vehicle. They still have their muscle cars, or they still have their gas SUVs, because that's the latest and greatest, and they're used to driving those. That's just what they're comfortable with, that's what they're accustomed to, so they don't see the same problems that other people that are trying to go full electric are experiencing. So I thought that was a really good explanation. It was like, if Elon's driving a Tesla and he notices a charging issue, he's going to bring it up and make changes. Whereas if the CEO of Hyundai isn't driving around an EV, he's not going to know about those things. And maybe someone in the boardroom brings it up. Hey, can we improve the charging network? And they're like, what? I think it's fine. Look at the map. See this map? Look at all the Electrify America stations. We don't need to build our own stations. They don't have a real world perspective. They have an on paper perspective. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Oh wow, thank you so much. The Tesla Barbarian super chatted. I've been watching your channel, by the way. I don't know if I've said anything, but you do amazing videos. I love the Tesla hater videos where your friend's driving around with you.
Yeah.
And I love your interviews that you do at the supercharger. You're an inspiration to me. I don't know how you do it, but love the energy you bring. So thank you so much for the super chat. He says, keep doing them. What's your Tesla origin story? Wencesless, how did you first become a Tesla fan? Oh, wow. That's very nice of you to ask. You were asking this to people in your videos. This is cool. Man, when did it start? I was always not a fan of gas. I didn't like gas engines for their sound, the smells, how complicated they were. I just never really was into cars growing up that much because of how complicated they were. And I was always a fan of alternative fuel types and fuel and energy. So before Tesla was a thing when I was a kid, when I first found out about hybrids, my dad was telling me about them at some point. I think he was like, yeah, some cars have this, like, they're partially electric, and at low speeds, they just don't even use the gas. And as soon as I found out hybrids were a thing, I was like, whoa, that's awesome. That's so cool. So it was like my dad was a teacher, and I was going to the same school that my dad worked at. And one of the other teachers at that school had a hybrid. It wasn't a Prius, but it was like a hybrid Honda Civic or something. It was like a blue sedan, and every time I got a chance to talk to him, I was like, so how's the car? He's like, oh yeah, it's really good. And he told about, at that time, it was like miles per gallon. He's like, oh yeah, I could get like 40 or 50 miles per gallon with this car. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. That's so cool. But then down the road, I think at some point my dad showed me that documentary, the Who Killed the Electric Car, where GM was literally, they made the EV1, which was not really that great a car, but people loved it. But it was lease only, and people wanted to keep the car. But GM knew that they made so much money off of servicing and maintenance that they took all the leased EV1s back by force and crushed them all because they knew that the electric car was going to threaten their business. And so once I heard that, I was like, oh, that sucks, because I want to go full electric. I would want an all-electric car because I don't want to pay for gas. I don't like gas stations. I don't like combustion engines. Not just for one, yes, environmentally, there's all kinds of advantages, but for two, it's just the cleanliness of it and the simplicity of it. You charge your car just like you would charge a phone or a laptop. I love that idea from the beginning. I just thought that was so much more simple, and they were quiet. But at some point, I think my dad, he would get magazines in the mail, like science magazines or something. I forget the name of the outlet, but at one point, I remember he got a magazine in the mail with the Model S on it, or the Roadster. It was like very, very early. And I think it was a magazine my dad got that did a special piece on Tesla. And when I first saw it, I was like, that's my dream car. Because my original thought before I heard about Tesla was, oh, we could have electric cars, but big oil is too powerful and they want to crush, they want to kill, any competition. And none of the gas car companies could survive if they made electric cars. So I was just like, electric cars are cool, but they can't exist because companies won't do away with them. And I knew at the time that the EV1 was a city car. It was not good at road tripping, and charging speed was an issue. But once I started reading about Tesla in the magazine, I was like, that's my dream car. That's what I want. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably like 8 or 9. I was not very old at the time. The Roadster came out in 2008. At least that's when they first started delivering. So I would have been 10 years old at the time. And the magazine probably was published before the Roadster came out, because I remember Tesla was in the news a bunch before they started delivering Roadsters. So I'm going to guess I was 10 or 11 when I first found that magazine and started reading about them. And my dad was showing me, like, look, there's this startup company and they're actually making all electric cars, and they looked cool. They weren't all ugly and clunky like the EV1 was. So it was still super expensive. Our family basically never bought new cars. So the Model S or the Roadster or whatever was $100,000, $80,000, $90,000. It was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And I was like, maybe one day when I'm famous or rich or something, I'll be able to afford a Model S, because I thought it looked cool and I liked the interior with the software emphasis and the display. And yeah, it was just my kind of car from the beginning. And then as time went on, I was always a fan. I always checked on Tesla on their websites and stuff, but it was always just like dream car material. It's like when you're a kid, you can barely afford an iPod. You're not thinking about buying cars, especially when my family was buying used cars and most of the cars we were buying were, you know, $8,000, $10,000. So the concept of buying a $70,000, $80,000 car was like just impossible. It was basically up there with Lamborghinis and, you know, what's your favorite car when you're talking to your friends at a young age and they would say, you know, oh, I like the Bugatti. You know, it's like, are you actually genuinely planning on buying those? No, it's like a dream thing. But it got more and more real as time went on. Once the more attention I started paying to Tesla, the more I started realizing, oh, this company's goal is not to be a luxury, you know, high-end, expensive automaker. They want to make cars cheaper over time. So when I started making YouTube videos, I occasionally started talking about them on how I thought electric cars were the future, and I wanted one, but I couldn't afford one. But there was all this hype leading up to the Model 3 launch. So I was pretty excited about that. Now, at the time, a $35,000 car was still completely out of the question. I was in high school, and I was making probably, at the time, $17,000 a year at my Mandarin Ranch job. It wasn't really a job. It was kind of just a summer job that I spent. Wasn't a career. Let's put it that way. So it wasn't really something I thought I could afford in the near term future, but I just thought, hey, maybe one day. And I guess I started following them a lot more once the Model 3 dropped, because I realized that their goal was to, you know, I finally started understanding the mission statement of like, make a low volume, expensive car, use that money to make a cheaper, higher volume car, and then use that money to make an even cheaper, higher volume car. Once I got behind that, I was like, okay, this is really impressive. And the supercharging network was growing at the time. And I never rode in a Tesla though until 2019, I think. My friends Randy and Nick rented one when we met up. We were podcasting friends, and all of us were big Tesla fans, but none of us had Teslas. We were all just like, yeah, maybe one day we can buy one. And they rented one for the day, and they let me check it out. And once I got inside one and I was seeing how it worked and the charging experience and how the software and the interior design was all clean and minimal, that's when the gears really started turning in my head, and like, oh crap, I need to like restructure my finances. I need to figure out a way to afford this, because I really, really want one of these. And the safety aspect of well as well is like, it made me hate my gas car even more. It just really, really started hating my gas car after that 2019 test ride we did. Or maybe it was 2018 actually. That was the first time I'd ever been inside a Tesla, although a family friend of mine that we see like once a year had a Model S back in like 2015, and I never rode in it, but I checked it out a couple times, and I always asked him lots of questions about it. So once it was the butt in seat selling tactic, right? Tesla doesn't need advertising. I just got in the car, rode around in it for the day, and we took it to a few different spots. And after that experience, I was like, okay, I'm sold on this. Like, before it was dream car, now it's like, okay, how do we make this happen? Dream car being like, you're not gonna, you know, start, most people at least aren't gonna start saving pennies and start cutting down on expenses so that they can afford the Bugatti Chiron, even if that's their dream vehicle. You know, it's just so expensive. But once I realized that Teslas were getting cheaper, and, you know, I was working YouTube full time, so I was actually able to have an income that could potentially save up enough for a Tesla, but again, not easily. It was going to take some time. So yeah, I guess I started doing videos about Tesla back in 2017 as a fan, and then after my test drive in 2018, I started doing videos on them more frequently, like at least once a month. And then near the end of 2019, I think, is when I started the EV channel, because I realized there was so much EV stuff to talk about, with more companies entering the picture like Rivian and Lucid, and Legacy Auto was getting more serious about it, like VW and Ford and Hyundai. Once there were all these other companies getting more serious about EVs, I was like, okay, this almost feels like its own separate genre. But I think what honestly truly inspired me to start the EV channel was the Cybertruck. And I think there's a lot of EV channels that were birthed because of the Cybertruck. Like, I was doing Tesla videos occasionally on my old tech channel, which I mostly did phone videos and videos on Apple and MacBooks and tablets and stuff. That's what most of that channel was, and just occasionally talk about Tesla. And those videos did pretty well, but the Cybertruck came out and it just blew up on the internet. Everybody was talking about it, and there was so much back and forth about this design and about the reasoning behind it. And once you understood the reasoning, Tesla's mission statement had never been more clear. It went from a company that's like, oh, we make cool electric cars, to this is why we design the way we design. And it's controversial, so it sparked discussion. It was not a boring launch by any means. Plus, they broke the glass and everything, so there was all these memes being made about it. But I made a video about the Cybertruck shortly after the event happened, and that video blew up. And it is still, to this day, on that tech channel, not this EV channel, that is still the video with the most amount of views from anything I've ever made. And it's still, to this day, the only Tailosive video to break the 1 million view mark. And there were so many people coming to that channel, and so many new viewers, that were all just there for the Cybertruck. But at the time, I was right next to reviewing some phone case, so like I did the Cybertruck video, and the very next video was like reviewing a smart battery case that Apple had come up with. And it just felt dumb to me that I was like, okay, I'm trying to get excited and talk all about this Cybertruck, and all these people are coming to the channel for the truck, and at the same time I'm trying to review a phone case? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And all the people that are subscribing to the channel are probably going to be really disappointed when they find out that, oh, this isn't just an EV channel. He talks about all kinds of weird phone stuff, and that's not why people are here. So I started noticing that all of the Tesla videos I did on that channel were getting a certain number of comments, and all of the Apple phone related stuff was getting a different set of comments. So I was like, even though it's all tech, technically, and it's all, going on the same channel, I'm finding completely separate audiences. These are not overlapping demographics as much as I think they are. So that's what inspired me to break off and say, like, okay, if I could really go into the weeds, basically, about EV news and battery chemistries and manufacturing and factory updates and that kind of thing, I think I can do my own channel with this. I think there's enough news to carry a whole separate channel. That way the tech channel can just be about phones, laptops, computers, and watches and stuff, and headphones. And then this channel can just be about vehicles that are electric. But I guess to answer your question, I was always into Teslas, even as I never reserved the Cybertruck. But at the time, me and my wife were discussing, because we had driven the Model 3, and we had a lot more experience with them now. So we were going back and forth on, like, can we afford the Tesla? Originally, we wanted to buy one in early 2020. That was the original plan. But then, based on how the channels were performing, we realized that because my income is so volatile as a YouTuber, it was going to be more responsible to pay off the house first, so that we don't have as much overhead, because my income is like this. So if my income was very stable and predictable, I would have no problem just having a mortgage and not paying off the house, and just buying a Tesla or getting a loan on a Tesla, or even leasing a Tesla or whatever, if I had predictable income. But I don't. So because of 2020, and my wife got furloughed from her job, so our income was kind of all up in the air. We were like, let's do the responsible things first. Let's pay off the house, and then we can work on getting the car. And then as 2020 progressed, we saw Battery Day, and we're like, oh, well, it seems like there's this new battery chemistry coming around the corner. Plus, we kind of wanted to work more on our investments for retirement. At the time, with both of us working from home, it didn't feel like we needed that much of a car. We didn't need a big fancy car or expensive car, because we weren't driving very much at the time. So it didn't feel responsible to buy a Tesla then either, because it felt like, well, the prices have been dropping. Throughout 2020, they were getting lower and lower. And we thought, well, if we just wait a bit longer, we could get the Model 2 or whatever. And if we wait a bit longer, they'll do the standard range Model Y. And so we waited and waited, then start realizing that, well, maybe the prices aren't going to go down indefinitely. prices start going up again, and the 4680s aren't as great as we thought, and they didn't come out as soon as we thought. And originally we were saving up for the Model Y, but the Model Y just kept getting more and more expensive, and we weren't really in love with the range either. When we first started the Tesla plan, it was like $58,000 with 330 miles of range. We didn't think that was amazing, but now that's a great deal. Like, now we wish we could get the Model Y for 58,000. But we were just holding off because we thought the 4680 Model Y was going to be better because of what they said at Battery Day. The range would improve, the cost would drop. I had the wrong expectation going in because I thought, well, Tesla obviously wants to make higher range vehicles, right? Because more range, everyone wants more range. And Tesla wants to make cheaper vehicles, right? Because more people will buy them, and that's their point. So I had a very surface level view of Tesla. And once I realized that the 4680s were not focusing on range and the 4680 Model Y was not focusing on lower price, I realized, like, when demand is as backed up as it is, Tesla's mission statement is not to make you the perfect car. It's not supposed to make you the best range vehicle or the cheapest vehicle. Their goal is just to move inventory as much as possible. And if demand weakens, then yes, they'll lower prices, but demand was not weakening. It was just getting worse. So that's when we realized, like, okay, we like the Model Y. We still admit the Model Y is a better vehicle, but we've been using a regular sedan for the past 5 years, and we've never really ran out of cargo space with it. It's not really a problem. We're fine with the sedan. So as much as we wanted the Model Y, we didn't want it $20,000 more than the Model 3 rear-wheel drive, especially once it got lithium iron phosphate. I was like, okay, this seems like a great deal, knowing that the cycle life is higher and knowing that you can charge it to 100% regularly. There was like all these great benefits of going with LFP. So once that came out, it really became on our radar, because we were in the process of, investing / saving. And we started driving more once the pandemic kind of eased and the restrictions weren't as bad, and we were traveling more and visiting more and more people, especially because last year my parents moved out of state. So we knew we were going to be visiting them and doing a lot more road trips once they moved. So yeah, I guess just circumstances aligned right, but we'd wanted a Tesla for years before getting one, but finally we had the resources thanks to you guys and your support, and the model was pretty competent. It had good range, good efficiency, and it was, something we knew we'd be happy with. And yeah, I think that's my extremely long answer to the question. But thank you, Tesla Barbarian, for tuning in and super chatting. He says, I appreciate it. I can't tell how much it means to me that you watch the channel and like what we do. I watch your channel and I listen to the podcast every weekend. Oh, that's great. You listen to the podcast too. Thank you so much. He says, butts and seats is exactly what we do. It's the most effective way to demonstrate the strength of Tesla. I agree. It gets a lot of people's heads turning. We showed it to some of our friends at a nearby town that had never been in a Tesla before, and they were like, what, you got one? So they got in it and they were riding around, and I was telling them how it worked, and they were looking at the display. And it's kind of an older couple, but the wife was sitting in the passenger seat and the husband was sitting in the back, and I was driving, and she was looking at the screen, and I was showing her how the reverse feature worked, and the cameras, and here's how you control the HVAC vents, and here's your efficiency and all the toy box features. And at one point I was driving her down the road, and she just looks at her husband and went, we got to get one of these. She just had one of those like light bulb moments, which was really cool to witness, because I definitely have had those light bulb moments as well. But they're dangerous. They're dangerous because those are expensive moments. Let's see. I look forward to seeing Aptera's and Sono Motors vehicles on the road as the years goes by. Solar EVs are the future. Maybe they're not as good as Tesla right now, but soon enough they will be. I think that they will be in the future, but I don't think they'll be all vehicles. I think solar specifically makes sense on hyper-efficient vehicles, but not all vehicles are going to be hyper-efficient, particularly pickup trucks and crossover SUV-type vehicles, which, unfortunately, those are very, very popular, especially in the United States. The best-selling vehicle for decades has been the F-150, and the next best-selling category as a whole is SUVs. And those are just larger, heavier, less aerodynamic vehicles that consume a bit more energy, and they don't have that much surface area for solar to work. I really only think solar makes a lot of sense on a vehicle like an Aptera, because it's so efficient, but that comes with its own set of compromises, right? It's a three-wheeler for one. It's a There's cats running around here. There's a two-seater, so it's not going to be a good family vehicle, and it's not going to have as much cargo space or as much practicality as a pickup truck. You're not going to be able to tow or have that much hitches on the back and stuff. So there is a market for it. I agree, and I think that the Aptera, assuming it does hit the market, I really genuinely hope it does. I think it will be the best-selling two-door vehicle in the world. Just for the cost. Like, I don't think if you factor in like 5-10 years cost of ownership, I don't think anybody will be able to make a cheaper vehicle. Like, yes, there are occasional road trips, but the vast majority of driving is like from home to work and back. And once people figure out that there's a vehicle, and a lot of people already have, that's why the Aptera has such a strong fan base. Once people figure out that there's a vehicle that can charge for free from the sun and go to and from work, and basically all you're paying for is tire maintenance and insurance, like, how can you beat that? Like right now, to charge my pretty efficient Model 3, it's costing, between $100 a month or so, and maybe $150 a month if I drive a lot. And with the Aptera, you could theoretically get that down to nothing for charging, and it's just basic, windshield wiper fluid. Plus, the Aptera is a pretty low starting price anyway, hoping to target somewhere around $26,000 or $30,000 US dollars for a vehicle that, a lot of people on the road are just driving by themselves or with one other person. That does address a pretty wide demographic. But I don't think it'll outsell pickup trucks. I don't think it'll outsell SUVs or sedans. So I think that it's going to be a very popular demographic, but I don't think it would be the most popular. Let's see. How long did I save? I guess about a year or so. Well, less than a year. We announced the Tesla plan back in October, and we had some money saved at that point. But then we were building up basically from October of last year. Although I think we just hit the 1 year mark, actually, since we announced the plan. It was like October 26th, I think. But since October of last year up until, when did I post the video about we had all the money for it? I think it was April. So, 2, 6, 6, maybe it was May. I can't remember. It was like 6 months of just all the money that the channels make is going towards the Tesla fund. And then once we hit May or June or whatever, we were at a month where we were like, okay, we have all the money for the car now. Now we're just waiting on Tesla. So all the money the channels made after that Tesla fund update video, that was just money for investing and emergency fund and that kind of stuff. Melon says, you and your wife's journey partially inspired me to plan my Model 3 purchase last November. Oh, really? That's cool. I hope you like it. Let's see. I'm 3% funded for it at this time, but I want an estimate so I can predict savings and timing. I'm just hoping that the demand can go down so that your percentage of your fund can go up without having to put much in it. If the price actually went down, that would get you a lot closer. Tesla Barbarian said, Law, we got to get one of these. That's awesome. Keep making these great videos, brother. I watched them all. Thank you for letting us to hear the genesis of your EV journey. Thank you, man. That means a lot. Just know I'm watching you too. I love your videos. Let's see. Wouldn't it be cool to leave your car in the desert, come back in a year, and it's got a full battery? A year? You wouldn't need to do a year. Aptera, with the full solar package, would do like 40 miles of range a day. And the first model they're making is like 400 miles of range. So it's just 10 days, like a week and a half. And you go from 0 to 100, basically. Although it's probably not going to be good on the materials of the car. That's one thing that I think Aptera's focusing on with their windows and the materials they make the vehicle out of, because it's a lot of composites. But I'm glad they're paying attention to that, because it's a concern I have. The Aptera, people are not going to want to park it inside. I would not, if we get our Aptera, I'm not parking it in the carport. I'm not parking it in a garage. I'm going to leave it out in the sun as much as possible, because that's the most cost-effective way for it to drive. But if it's in the sun all day, every day, that's just going to age things a little bit worse. So I believe in the videos they've posted about the development process, they have said that's a big concern, and they're working on that, and they're making sure that's not going to wear out too many parts of the vehicle or cause a bunch of problems. So that's something you've got to think about when designing a vehicle like that, because you have to understand people are going to intentionally leave this thing in the sun. You know, a lot of the time when we drive into a parking lot, we're like, oh, park there, it'll be in the shade. The Aptera is going to be the opposite. Park there, it's in the sun, you know. Don't park there, it's in the shade. That's not good, you know. Yeah, you wouldn't need to be there for a year. Harvey says, I was thinking of grabbing a used 2017 Tesla for free supercharging so I can get away with having lower gas costs. You could. It's not a horrible idea, but just only do that if you're very close to a supercharger. And also keep in mind that supercharging is not as good for the battery health, and ultimately I think you're going to find it more convenient in the long run to just plug in from home. If you have to replace gas station trip with supercharging trip, that's going to become more annoying, because obviously Tesla's range isn't as common or as good as a gas car. So if you have to drive home and be like, no, don't plug in because that'll cost more, I need to free supercharge, I think the free supercharging makes a lot of sense if you're like road tripping a lot. Like some people I know have Teslas that are like constantly on the road for work or just for their lifestyle. They're just like driving on the freeways all the time. So if you're supercharging like multiple times a week, then yeah, that free supercharging is probably going to pay for itself and you'll hit a break-even point pretty easily. Someone like me, though, free supercharging is pretty worthless. I have not supercharged at all in the past month and a half, and it's not because supercharging is expensive, it's because I don't live close to a supercharger. If I had to drive my car to the nearest supercharger every time to charge, oh, it would be a nightmare. It would be much more annoying. Even if it was technically cheaper, I would be spending a lot more time driving on the road, and yeah, it just would not be practical. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Hasael, thank you. He says, saw Apple's Wall Street Journal interview and hated how they dodge questions. Do you wish they were more open like Elon, or does Elon write checks you can't cash? I don't think it's one or the other. It's both. Elon is more open, but he also writes checks he can't cash in terms of full self-driving promises or Tesla bot promises or affordability promises. Oh, the Teslas will get cheaper again, I promise, you know, that kind of thing. Or he's late on things all the time, or we'll have that done in the next couple weeks. 2 weeks. That's he's famous for. Yeah, I wish Apple's executives were more open and honest. I just think it's more interesting that way, but they are $1 trillion company, and a lot of people don't like how open Elon is. A lot of people prefer when you keep your kind of controversial takes or political takes to yourself, because they know it's going to be reported on in the media. Anything Elon says, which I to be very clear, I do not agree with everything Elon says. In fact, there's a lot of things he says that I don't agree with, but I intentionally don't dive into those because I know they get political, and I know the internet and online is not a good way to handle tough, controversial political subjects. I intentionally am like, let's keep the channel on topic, let's keep it on focus, and that's probably how the Apple executives feel. Is they're like, well, let's just keep these things to ourselves, because it's just going to create controversy, and a lot of people are going to start hating us if you put out your personality and your personality is not likable. Apple is a company that has to focus a lot more on demand. All of their products are basically dictated not by how fast they can build them, but how many they can sell. Sometimes they're back-ordered and they need to build units faster, but for the most part, they are performing based on how many people want to buy their product. Usually, Apple is not supply constrained. There's a few exceptions, but in the grand scheme of things, Tesla is quite the opposite. Tesla has a huge amount of demand, and they know that there's a wide array of people that want to go electric, and there's an even larger demographic of people that want to buy Teslas that just can't because they're too expensive, but Tesla can, in the future, if they need to, as they're probably starting to in China right now, they can just lower prices as needed to increase demand at any time. Apple can't really do that very much, or if they do, it's very rare. If there's not enough people ordering a certain iPhone, they're not going to just drop prices across the board on the iPhone, or at least it's very uncommon for them to do that. So I understand why their public persona is a lot more safe and a lot more calculated. But Elon, I think, knows that Tesla has never had an issue with demand. So it doesn't really matter if he says things that are controversial or ticks people off because people are still going to buy the product. If it got to the point where they were doing polls and they were realizing a lot of people are not buying Teslas and you're running out of margins or you're running out of demand and it's because they don't like Elon, then it could become problematic. But I don't think that's likely. It's just there's just too much demand for EVs. It doesn't really matter what he thinks ultimately, because I don't I don't think it hurts the company that much what he says. I'm sure it hurts a little bit. Um, I've heard lots of people. I've been in social environments where people didn't know I had a Tesla, and they were like, "Oh, that Elon guy is crazy," and I hate Elon. And there's people that have issues with him, no doubt, and a lot of that will result in people not buying the car. I've straight up talked to people in my life that are like, the Teslas are cool. I just don't want to support Elon Musk because he said X Y Z. I personally have an easier time separating the creator from the product, in the same way, like, I really enjoyed Top Gun Maverick. I thought Top Gun was the new one that came out this year was a great movie. I enjoyed it a lot. That doesn't mean I support Scientology, but I did buy, a movie ticket, and that box office money went to Tom Cruise. But it was because I got entertainment out of it. I enjoyed the 2 hours that Top Gun played for me, and I had a good time. That doesn't mean I support everything Tom Cruise ever stood for. In the same way, I can really enjoy and love and appreciate the Tesla as a vehicle without agreeing with everything Elon says. I think the world would be a very desolate, ugly, gross place if you had to agree with every opinion of the person you're buying the product from. Like, if you found out that you were buying a house from someone that voted for someone that you didn't vote for, would you not buy the house? No, you don't care. You're like, okay, they can think what they want. I just want a good house, and the house is a good deal, and I like the house, so I'm buying it. You know, so that's why I think it doesn't ultimately matter what he thinks, but I do appreciate Elon dropping more of the design philosophy and like updates coming for their products. But at the same time, to be completely frank, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world for Elon to leave Tesla. Like, I think that I agree with others saying that Elon is an accelerator. Like, Elon helps things get done faster. But at a certain point, when Tesla has ramped to the insane volume that they're targeting, whether it's 15 or 20 million vehicles a year, once they're there, if Elon just decides, I want to go all in on SpaceX and I'm not going to be at Tesla anymore, I wouldn't mind Tesla becoming more of that like safe, uh, like scheduled kind of company where, similar to Apple, they have like set events throughout the year where they talk about all the updates that they're bringing, both in software and hardware. And that way you kind of know when to expect or what to expect with new products. And Tesla will probably have a wider array of vehicles to choose from. They could start having multiple variants of things. Here's the Cyber SUV. Here's the Cyber Roadster. Here's the Cyber Sedan. They could start going down that route. Um, I don't think that would be bad either. Having a company that's just kind of careful and they know what they're doing and they're trying to just convince the most amount of people to buy their product is not a bad thing either. There's pros and cons. Um, but thank you for the super chat. Logan says, if you have the 400-mile range, drive 50 miles a day, and are outside the whole time getting 40 miles a day charge, it would take 40 days to run out. Whoa. That's trippy. That's impressive. And I feel like most people are not driving 50 miles a day. It's like, sure, you might, if you have a longer commute, you might drive like 50 or 60 miles a day every weekday. But then on the weekend, maybe you're not driving to your job. Maybe you're just driving to the grocery store, to a restaurant and back. So on the weekends, you're only driving like 10 miles or something a day. So on those off days where you're not commuting, the range can increase thanks to the solar on the vehicle too. But yeah, there's other factors. It's the goal is just to make it the most efficient vehicle possible, which I love. I love that idea, and I really hope they can make it. A vehicle cover will be necessary for solar EVs if you don't have a garage to park it in. That'll increase longevity on the batteries and solar panels. I assume you mean a cover that doesn't cover the solar panels, but that's kind of the problem, right? Where do you want to cover it up? Because Aptera even puts solar cells on the dashboard inside the car. They literally have solar cells that charge from the sun going through the windshield. So if you put up, you'd have to get interior covers that cover, I don't know, inside of the car. Yeah, RJ and Chris Anthony are pretty cool CEOs. I agree. It's okay to not have a loose cannon as a CEO. It's not that bad. RJ probably has a lot of opinions or maybe morals or political opinions that maybe we don't all agree with. But you know what? He keeps it to himself. And a lot of people prefer that. You know, it's like sometimes you go to a family dinner. You know, we got Thanksgiving coming up, right? You got to have family in town, you get together. And you know that there's a lot of people in your family that have different political opinions or hot takes that you don't agree with. Do you love to just get together and all start fighting about that? Or do you prefer, let's put our differences aside and let's just come to a common agreement that, you know, we love each other, we're family, and we're going to enjoy this nice meal together and just kind of catch up on life without talking about big picture, here's how I think the government should work, or here's what I think the military should, you know, all those big tough subjects that Elon loves to share his opinions on. Sometimes it's okay to just get together and just find common ground. And I feel like that's why a lot of people respect Chris and Anthony and RJ. It's, you know, some people appreciate the brutal honesty. Some people are like, I like that he says what he thinks. And, you know, some people can appreciate that. But I see the pros and cons. There's advantages to both. One thing to keep in mind with big companies, the guy in the chair doesn't have the same mindset as everyone else within the company. There's so many people that make the company work. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think about that as well, is like a lot of people say, like, why did Elon design the car this way? And I'm like, well, Elon's not the chief of design. Franz von Holzen is the one who basically designed the inside and out of the Model 3, the Model Y, Model S and X. Like, he's the guy in charge of the looks. What does Franz think of all of Elon's controversial takes? Do you think everybody at Tesla agrees with everything Elon says? No. There's like over 100,000 people working for Tesla. I'm sure they all have differing opinions and different thoughts. And you're supporting an infrastructure of thousands of people that make this vehicle possible. Are there going to be some crazy people in that group of thousands? Of course. There's going to be a bunch of people in there that are probably jerks that you don't agree with. And there's probably some people you do agree with. But that kind of comes back to my whole point of, you need to come back to the argument of, like, is the product good? If you like what the product is and you like what the company is doing as a whole, not just what one guy at the company thinks, then if it's a good price and you agree to it, then yeah, there's nothing wrong with buying it. It doesn't mean that everybody at the company has the same viewpoint as you. That just gets ridiculous. When people claim that Elon is the reason for Tesla's sustained productivity, they're saying they don't have faith in those working under Elon. For Tesla's sustained productivity, they say they don't have faith in those working under. I don't think it's that black and white, Jennifer. I think there's a lot of people that agree Elon can help, especially when he's working on something that he knows a lot about, which is engineering. It's what most people view it as is like, yes, Tesla would not die without Elon. I believe that. And honestly, I would kind of welcome it. It seems like these days anyway, Elon's so focused on SpaceX, and now he's going to be spending more and more time at Twitter. I feel like Tesla's kind of already set on a path to succeed, you know? In this stage, it feels almost pretty obvious what the outcome of the next 10 years is going to be. You got to pick more factory locations for gigafactories, which I genuinely don't think is that hard a thing to do. You just kind of pick locations based on who's going to give you the biggest tax breaks, where's the largest labor force, and where's the most amount of demand. So you've got a huge factory in China because there's a big amount of demand there. You've got a big factory ramping in Europe. once you're done ramping the Model Y, apply some single-piece castings and maybe some BYD blade batteries to the Model 3 and start ramping the Model 3 in Europe and expand your product lineup. If you want to build more factories, you could build them in other populated areas like Japan. That's the 4th largest car market in the world. Build a gigafactory there. Start, reducing the amount of time spent in transit. You don't have to export as many vehicles. And once you match demand, lower prices. Looking for more battery suppliers that are efficient, building more lithium refineries, which they're doing. I don't really know, is Elon helping that much? I'm sure he's doing something, but I feel like Tesla would be okay without him at this point. That's kind of just how I feel in the moment. Again, he'll never go into exquisite detail on what he's working on, but at least from what I can tell, it seems like Elon is spending a lot of time with the AI team and trying to get the bot working and trying to get full self-driving working, which, as you guys, if you don't know my opinion on it, I'm pretty skeptical of the robotaxi future. I think it's going to become way more... There's going to be way more edge cases, and it's going to become way more complicated than they think, and it'll probably only work in a very specific set of jurisdictions, and therefore won't be as insanely profitable as they thought it was going to be. So I'm kind of like, you know what? Let the AI team just do their thing. Let the battery division of the company work on ramping batteries, but we kind of have already cracked that code. It's just a matter of finding the right mines, which will have the best, environmental practices, and finding the right places to mine iron and lithium. I think they will, even without Elon. If heaven forbid, if Elon died in a car crash tomorrow, I wouldn't lose faith in Tesla. I still think they would hit their production targets, and they would ramp effectively, and they would pick wise locations for gigafactories. It's just that Elon being there, obviously he's achieved a lot in his life, and he predicted and had enough foresight to see where reusable rocketry was going and where the automotive market was going, and predicted a lot of things accurately. So he's probably helping and helpful to be there. But I don't think it's so black and white. It's like you can either only trust in Elon or you can only trust in the Tesla team. It's like, no, it's like, I'm sure it helps to have him, but are they going to die without him? No, I don't think so. Let's see. Tesla dropping prices won't be enough when markets start to saturate. There are not enough chargers near me. I rent, and they will not put in chargers as it's too expensive. It's not anywhere near close to being a problem. Tesla dropped prices a little bit, which they have 30% margin, so they can afford to. But Tesla dropped prices a little bit in China, and then the new wave of orders came in, crashed the website, and now they've started raising prices on color options again. So it didn't take much. They dropped prices like a couple grand, and boom, now they have way more demand than they can meet again. It's really like they have so much margin built in. I disagree with the concept that dropping prices won't be enough. And if your argument is Tesla, as they said in the earnings call, they're going to tackle whatever the limiting factor is. Right now, it is not demand. If it becomes demand, then they're going to figure out what is preventing people from ordering our car. Well, there's not enough chargers near me. Okay, then we're going to build more chargers. Well, I don't like the car design. Okay, then we'll improve the car design. Oh, I don't like the range. It's not good enough for me. Okay, then we'll make the range better. Tesla has always tackled whatever the biggest problem is. And right now, it's availability. So that's why they're tackling that. They're figuring out how many of these vehicles can we make and how quickly can we build them. Let's focus on ramping production. But in all of their years, through the recession, through their production hell, through everything Tesla's gone through, they've never had an issue shipping cars. They've never had a bunch of cars stuck on the lot saying, oh, God, there's no one here to buy these things. They would rather sell cars at a loss than let them sit at the factory and wait for hopefully someone to order it. And they are so far from selling cars at a loss at this point. So that's why I just don't believe that the price drops won't be enough. They'll do whatever they need to. One thing to keep in mind... Oh, I think I read that already. Just saw Elon walk into Twitter HQ holding a sink. I'd love to see Tim Cook do something crazy like that. Yeah, I like the memes. The fun when Elon's trying to be funny, that's when I enjoy him the most. When he's trying to convince you to spend $15,000 on full self-driving, or buy the stock because they're going to make a humanoid robot that's going to replace all labor, that's when I'm not as into Elon. That's where I'm like, okay, move on, move on. You're not, I think rightfully Elon has probably a very large ego. If anyone deserves a large ego, it's probably him when you've accomplished as much as he has. At the same time, I think that ego sometimes gets to the better of him, and it makes him feel overly confident, and it makes him think he can achieve things that have never been achieved, when in reality, some things just aren't possible. But I do believe if it is possible, Elon will find a way. If there's any way to do it, he's probably going to figure it out. But sometimes there's not a way, Sometimes it's just not possible, which can happen. Optimus may just be that ultimate bot Elon is building for tweeting, but suddenly it all makes sense. Yes. He's going to get rid of all the Twitter bots and then make his own bots. Elon is now the chief twit. Yes. Elon was needed in the early days. He built a great company that would hold together even if he left at this point. As long as they don't change the focus on R&D, they will be fine. That's kind of how I feel about like Steve Jobs versus Tim Cook. Steve Jobs was visionary. Why is there's a chicken walking right up to the car? Don't be pecking my car. Oh god. I just wonder if he's like looking at the ultrasonic sensors and he's like, I'm gonna peck on these things and see what happens. Our neighbors got chickens, but they don't keep them in their they don't have a cage for them or anything. They just run around our yard all the time. There's just chickens in my yard. Yeah, it's so weird all the time. I wish they'd lay some eggs. That'd be nice. But yeah, like Steve Jobs was a visionary and very innovative and Steve Jobs is not even that similar to Elon Musk, because Steve was not really an engineer. He really just had an idea of how products should work and how they should look and how they should feel. But he was mostly just telling engineers how it should be. He wasn't really that hands-on when it came to the actual engineering. But Steve Jobs was needed to get Apple off the ground to make them the big known company that they were. But I think Tim Cook is what Apple needed to maintain their well-established brand and to keep, the margins good and to keep inventory moving. If you look at how Apple's revenue has performed and how much inventory they've moved since Steve Jobs is gone, they've done great. Tim has done a fantastic job, even though a lot of people would argue Tim is less innovative, which I don't completely agree with. I still think Apple has done a lot of good things post Steve Jobs. People just don't hold it at this impossible holy standard that they hold the iPhone and the iPad. But Tim, I think, has done a lot with the watch and the AirPods and the AirTags, which have changed our world and made a big impact on how, we find items, or how headphones look or feel, or how watches can be more and more capable. Play that fart. That would be a good idea. Oh, I should do that. You can play emissions outside the car. Can I show you guys this? I'm tempted. Out here. That's the chicken. Fart mode. Why does it just start playing music? Oh no, I'm gonna get copyright claimed. The chicken did look at me though. That's awesome. Can I zoom in? It won't let me zoom in on the chicken. Oh, there's one over there. There it is. You guys see it? Where'd it go? Here we go. Fart. Go. It's not doing it. Fine, I'll do it inside the car. And now outside. Stop! Just stop. Okay. We farted the chicken away. What a beautiful thing. Neighbor's chickens equals free chicken dinner. Well, they're not very big chickens. I don't think they have much meat on them. None of them are mine. I've never bought a chicken in my life, but the neighbors buy them and then they just run everywhere. That's hilarious. Elon's best quality, in my opinion, is his ability to push the companies into uncharted territory to push ahead of all other companies. He doesn't lead reactionary companies that wait for others and react. Interesting. Reactionary companies. I still feel like as long as Tesla stays true to their mission statement, they would still make bold decisions. Like, I don't know, a good question maybe for you guys to answer. You guys have been asking questions today. Why don't I ask you a question? Do you think if Elon Musk had left Tesla, say in 2017, 2018, but they were not bought out, for the sake of the example, they're still their own company, they're not bought by Apple or anything, but Elon Musk left just because, I don't know, SpaceX is his true passion and he wants to spend more time at SpaceX or Neuralink or whatever. He leaves Tesla. Would they have still released the Cybertruck? Do you think that would have been the design? Or do you think Tesla would have gone with a more traditional, basic-looking pickup truck that's essentially an F-150 with a Tesla logo on it? Or, honestly, I think what's closer to a regular-looking Tesla truck is a Rivian. Rivian with a Tesla logo is basically what people are asking for when I hear them say, Tesla should make a normal-looking pickup truck, too. Why does Troy Teslike say that so much? Can someone tell him to stop? Like, it's pointless? Troy Teslike has all of this great data, right? He collects all of these great analytics and he shares them with us between the orders and the delivery numbers and the production numbers, and he has these great estimates. But he keeps asking Elon, every time Elon tweets, it's like, can you also make a normal truck outside of the Cybertruck? It's like, dude, they have 2 million reservations for the Cybertruck, and you're saying they should make another kind of truck just because you don't like the Cybertruck look? Like, dude, just buy a Rivian if that's what you really want. See, that's what's interesting. Everybody in the chat's like, nope, that was all Elon. But Elon is not the chief of design. That's the thing. That's all Franz. I'm still suggesting Franz is at the company. What if Franz is still chief of design? You think the only way Cybertruck happens is with Elon? I don't know. Everyone's saying nope, but I don't completely agree, because I still think that the Cybertruck aligns with their mission statement, because everything about the Cybertruck was designed for manufacturing efficiency and, aerodynamics and also just capability. I think there's a lot of advantages to the Cybertruck design that you don't have with all other pickup trucks. And Elon's mentality of just wanting to stand out, wanting to look different, because we know that we could easily make a pickup truck that looks like every other pickup truck. That's obvious. It's not that hard. Just put some batteries in it, have a nice big frunk, just like the Denali or the Lightning or whatever. It's easy to do that, but they wanted to try something different that they thought would stand out. The durability and the lack of paint makes it a lot easier to scale. And I think that aligns with the accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. Franz generated the design with the influence of Elon. It's true. I'm sure they worked together on it, but I still just feel like Cybertruck would have... It's interesting that you guys don't agree and you think that was all Elon, in which case I guess credit where credit is due, because the Cybertruck's the most heavily demanded vehicle of all time. But I still think that most of the decision-making with the Cybertruck was based on the mission statement, which that's the point. Tesla's bigger than Elon. The mission statement is what matters, not what Elon wants. Design engineers don't have free region over all aspects. They are guided by their managers. But he's the chief. He's in charge. I mean, Elon is the techno king, yes, but I have a feeling that Franz, when designing it, was thinking of what would help accelerate the transition. That's partly why he chose such a clean, minimal design for the Model 3 and Model Y, as they were trying to streamline and simplify things as much as possible. And Franz has always had a big emphasis on aerodynamics with all of his car designs. And he probably knew. I just can't picture Franz von Holzen designing a truck that looks like a Rivian. I just don't visualize that. You think if Elon was not involved at all, he wouldn't have tried to make some kind of more aerodynamic... I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have been steel if Franz was the only one in charge. But the unveil would still require a wacky, goofy CEO that's also extremely capable. Elon fits that perfectly. I guess that's true. They would have a harder time unveiling it without Elon, because he's kind of the madman that's willing to do it. you've got money people involved without Elon. You mean many people? Cybertruck probably will stay a concept or in a museum as a prototype. You need to be somewhat crazy like Elon to push that concept forward. Yeah, maybe you're onto something. You could be right. I don't know. I just get the feeling that assuming Elon was at the company and founded the company, there's a lot of Elon's craziness or Elon's boldness that is willing to stand out that I don't think is exclusive to Elon. That's where I think I may disagree with a lot of you, is like Elon's the only kind of guy that would be willing to come out with a weird looking vehicle and actually sell it. I was like, I think because he was at Tesla, and he still is at Tesla, but in this hypothetical where he was at Tesla until 2017, 2018, there would be a lot of people attracted to that craziness and that absurdness of like how little can we put in the car and how basic of an interior can we make it. And there'd still be everybody that was there for the Model 3 and Y ramp, and they know how hard it is to have so many trims and so much variety. Financial people, I still think the Cybertruck makes a lot of financial sense. Tesla's usually the company that lets finance decide the product design more than any other. GM sells the Bolt at a loss. The Lightning, I'm pretty sure, is still sold at a loss. But the Cybertruck is very much designed for like, okay, it requires less floor space if we don't have a paint shop. We have an exoskeleton because that simplifies on parts and manufacturing, and we just have a structural pack merged with an exoskeleton. Keep it simple, keep it basic. Don't have a lot of buttons, don't have a lot of dials, don't have a lot of color options. You just have the yoke, big old display. That's it. Not a lot of buttons. Just keep it simple. I think that the financial people would be in favor of a design that's a lot cheaper to build. That's not to say that it will be cheap to sell. I think the demand dictates the price, not the cost of manufacturing. You don't want something this radical, which is why they keep asking on the earnings calls. Well, now that the Cybertruck's out, everybody is excited about it. I mean, the demand is off the charts, and there's a ton of interest in it. So I don't think the traditional people are against it in that way. You think Tesla will need to motivate people to accept their vehicles prior to 2023 to hit their numbers? What would stop people from waiting for January due to the tax credit, free supercharging? Well, right now it doesn't seem to be a problem. Tons of people are taking delivery, and we're only a couple months away from 2023. So yeah, I think they don't. I mean, you'll lose your deposit. That's what Tesla's doing now. Is like if you don't accept delivery, then you lose out on $250. I guess for a lot of people, it will still be worth it to wait for the tax credit because you'll miss out on $250, but you'll still get $7,000 off the car or whatever. But ultimately, it's not. I still don't think the tax credit is very clear. It's based on where the materials in the battery packs were mined, and we still don't have very clear answers with that regarding the Model 3 rear-wheel drive or the Model Y. So I think a lot of people have an oversimplified viewpoint of the tax credit, and they just think, oh, everybody gets $7,000 off the car, and it's not that simple. In fact, I don't think the Model 3 rear-wheel drive will get anything off because the battery pack is imported. I think the Cybertruck has all that demand only because of the specs, not the design. I think the demand started because of the specs, but then the design people fell in love with over time. And now the design is in love, and it's just as much the specs. At least that's my personal guess. I think ultimately the design is not that important. What matters with electric pickup truck buyers right now is just, is it electric and is it a pickup? They will literally buy anything. Tons of people are buying overpriced Lightnings. Tons of people are buying Rivians at way over MSRP. Tons of people are buying the Hummer EV. GM had to shut off orders on the Hummer EV. There was like over 60,000 people ordered that thing, and it's ridiculous. 6 figures, little over 300 miles of range. It's not that practical. It's, in my opinion, kind of ugly. It's not very efficient. And not, I guess it has crab walk and tight turning, and it's good for off-roading, but it's just a big rich people toy, and there were still a ton of people ordering it. So in my view, like, the Cybertruck could have 300 miles of range and be well over $100,000, and they would still not be able to build enough of them. That's how much demand there is for them, especially now that there's all these organizations buying up Teslas and renting them all out in the Turo network because they figured out that they can cover the loan payment through rental service. There's a bunch of rental. Hertz is buying them up in bulk, and there's another company, I forget what they're called, but they have a Tesla as a subscription service where they're buying thousands of Teslas and renting them out based on a monthly thing instead of a daily thing like Turo. Cybertruck's going to be very, very high in demand for rentals because a lot of people just want a pickup truck for occasional, like I want to move something or I want to go on a camping trip, but I don't need to own it forever. Cybertruck would be very, very high in demand for rentals, so there's going to be a bunch of people just buying them for that. And like the Kilowatts has like 50 Cybertrucks on order, and that's just a YouTube group. So the Hummer EV is neat. That's it. I know, and they're crazy expensive, and they still are back ordered. I agree, $250 is nothing compared to the price of the cars, especially for the Model Y. I mean, it's not nothing. If I just took $250 out of your pocket, you wouldn't say that's nothing. But you have to order it again, and then that moves you to the back of the line, which means there's a longer period where you're driving around a gas car or your old car, which you clearly don't want that much. If the Cybertruck releases for over 80,000, 95% of the reservations will be canceled. Yep, you're exactly right, Rafa bro. And guess what 5% of 2 million is? Plug it in. That's 6 zeros. 2 million times 0.05. That's 100,000 Cybertrucks. How long do you think it's going to take Tesla to build 100,000 Cybertrucks when each one is going to require, at minimum, a 130 kilowatt hour battery pack, a larger battery pack than that of a Model S or X, both of which they're still only building around less than 20,000 a quarter? So it's going to take over a year for Tesla to build enough Cybertrucks to reach 5% of the reservations. And you don't think there's going to be more people reserving during that year? You don't think more people are going to get in line? Especially, there's going to be a whole nother wave of reservations once the Cybertruck is out. There's a bunch of people that just don't order things that are theoretical. Once the Cybertruck is in production and it's delivering, there's going to be another big wave of people that want to buy it. So that's my whole point. Tesla can lose 95% of reservations, and they would still have a back order. There would still not be enough vehicles. So no one will ever rent a Cybertruck to actually use it as a tool. If anyone rented the Cybertruck, it would just be to have fun. Doesn't change the fact that money is being spent on it. I think people would use it as a tool occasionally, but why do people rent Teslas now? It'd be much cheaper to rent a Honda Civic or something for the day, but they choose to rent Teslas because it's more fun. Same thing with the Cybertruck. Cybertruck's like fun squared because it doesn't look like any other vehicle, and it's going to turn heads, and we know how much traffic it generates just from anytime you post an article with the Cybertruck in the headline or a video with the Cybertruck in the title. It gets a lot of attention because there's demand. There's a ton of interest in it, regardless of if they can afford it or not. Let's see. Prices will not drop anytime soon. Materials and production too limited because production started to catch up, so people aren't paying new prices on used anymore. Yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention in yesterday's video is just like the Model Y is ramping production a lot, right? Because Giga Texas is about to hit or is basically at 2,000 a week, and within the next year, they'll probably be around 4,000 or 5,000 a week. That's a lot more Model Ys than we had before when it was just Fremont. But Model 3, not ramping that much. There's not really any plans for Fremont to expand Model 3 production. There's not a lot of plans for Giga Texas to add Model 3 because they know after Model Y's ramp, they're doing Cybertruck. After Cybertruck, they're probably doing Semi or Cyberquad. Don't forget about the Cyberquad, Elon, please. And after that, at that point, Tesla's probably thinking, no, we need to work on Robotaxi vehicle. So there's not a lot of intention on expanding Model 3 production at this point, at least in the US. So I don't think there's going to be a big influx of Model 3 availability, which means Model 3 price drops. Unless there's just a huge drop in people ordering them. There's clearly way more people ordering Model Ys, which is a way more profitable vehicle for Tesla, but The wait time on Model 3 rear-wheel drive has definitely dropped, considering I waited 6 months for mine, and a lot of people these days are waiting like a month or two. But I don't think that's because the demand has necessarily dropped. I think it's because they turned off orders on the long range, and they're now building a lot more LFP Model 3s. Because there's such a wide price margin between that Model 3 and all other Teslas. Not even the performance, but just $47,000, $46,000 Model 3. Okay, kind of expensive, but it's somewhat reasonable, kind of close to the average selling price of a new car. Next most expensive Tesla, $63,000. Whoa. There's like nothing in the 50,000 range. That's like the big jump you got to make. So, with that being the jump, I have a feeling that there's a lot more people going with rear-wheel drive now than before. It doesn't really make sense to build a gigafactory in Giga Canada. The tax breaks wouldn't be very good, and the population of Canada is lower than California, so you'd be better off. And Canada's not that far from the United States factories anyway. So I know people have talked about that, and there's been some rumors about that, but it just doesn't make sense to me. At least not a fully fledged gigafactory. I think they've talked about building a factory in Canada that would just build something specific, like machinery for factories, or it wouldn't be building like hundreds of thousands of cars, though, in a region where there's only 30 million people. I'm surprised the standard range still hasn't gone up in price yet. Yeah, I think it's because they have enough cells for it. They're all coming from China. They're all getting lithium iron phosphate batteries from CATL, and they've got plenty of them. So I don't think there's availability of the rear-wheel drive. So that helps keep the price down. Let's see. If people start canceling their reservations, I would be happy. It means I'll get my Cybertruck sooner. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way, Mustafa. I actually ran a poll a while back where I suggested, and I know I could be wrong on this, but I feel pretty confident about it, to be frank, especially with the energy density we're seeing of the 4680s and how Tesla has scrapped high-range vehicles in the past. I said, assuming, like, I'm right, just assume for a second that I'm totally right. You don't have to believe me, but if I am right, and the Cybertruck cost over $100,000 and has a little over 300 miles of range, would you cancel your reservation? I ran a poll. One of the options was, I don't have a reservation. Doesn't matter what the Cybertruck costs. I'm not getting it. The two other options were, yes, I would cancel. That's too expensive. Or no, I would still go with it. A surprising amount said no, I would still go with it. It was not a low percentage. It was not most. I think it was like once you've factored out the option that says I'm not getting a Cybertruck regardless, and you just looked at the two options, it was like 1-to-3 ratio. It was like 1 in 3 people with a reservation would keep it, even at that high a price. And a lot of the motivation, rightfully so, was, well, even if it's too expensive, I would take delivery and sell it for a profit because it's going to be so high in demand. I don't want to lose my spot in line, which personally, I don't think there is a spot in line. I think Tesla's just going to deliver based on region, just like they did with the 4680 Model Y. If you're near Texas, you'll get your Cybertruck sooner. It doesn't matter when you ordered. They don't prioritize vehicle delivery based on who ordered first. That's not how it works. If you're in an area where a lot of other people ordered a Cybertruck and there's a big shipment of Cybertrucks coming out to you, you'll get yours faster than even if you ordered the first second the website went up. The very first second you could order a Cybertruck. If you're in the middle of, I don't know, Minnesota, and no one else around you ordered one, then you're still going to be waiting way longer than someone who ordered, like, a couple months before delivery in the Austin area. Because they're like, oh, well, he's close by. And Tesla focuses on how many vehicles can we deliver first. So they start on what's closest to the factory. So I don't think it's that valuable to hold on to your reservation based on the way Elon's talked about it. He's like, I mean, it was a refundable $100. You know, it won't cost that. It won't cost what we thought it would. So I don't think there's some people hold on to their reservation thinking like, well, this is really valuable. I locked in my price, and I'm like, I don't really think you locked in anything. Even full self-driving, I don't think you locked in. If you read the fine print, they're going to start production with the quad motor, which technically none of you have actually reserved because the only specs they had reservations for was single, dual, and tri, all three of which I predict will get discontinued because the quad motor powertrain is not that expensive. And Tesla doesn't like having varying powertrains. All the Model Ys are dual motor. All the Model Ys are dual motor. And the Model 3 has a single motor and a dual motor. That's it. Cybertruck is going to be so backordered and so much pent-up demand. And I think the margins are still going to be very thick on it. So if, let's say, no one orders a Cybertruck once the real specs drop, which isn't going to happen, but for the sake of the example, everyone stops ordering Cybertrucks once the specs come out. 95% cancel, right? They still have 100,000 orders to fill. It's going to take them a year and a half to get through that 100,000 orders. And then once they get through that 100,000 orders, they say, okay, let's make a dual motor so that it's cheaper. Or do you just lower the price? Keep the existing assembly line going. Don't have to shut down anything. You just lower the price. Okay, now it's 90,000. Oh, maybe some people say 90,000. That's a bit more reasonable. They start ordering again. Maybe it's not enough though. Okay, how about it's 80,000 now? I think it would be much cheaper for Tesla to just lower the prices than it would be for them to designate a whole separate line. Okay, here's the dual motor line. Here's the quad motor line. I think that Tesla's just going to decide that the demand is high enough and the functionality of all-wheel drive and traction control is so practical, and we just want to say that's a standard thing on the Cybertruck. So I think they're going to have a bunch of orders. I don't think 95% are going to cancel. I do think most will cancel, but I don't think as many as you think, even with crappy specs. I think like 70% will cancel, but then you'll still have several 100,000 vehicles back ordered. Why aren't EV ports standardized? Will that happen then in the near future? Not in the U.S. They are in the EU and Asia, though. The U.S. just has a hard time agreeing on those kinds of things. That's politics for you. But, yeah, I wish they were standard. I wish Tesla port was the standard. Nick will get his Cybertruck. It's a win. His current lifestyle job needed a different solution. We can respect that responsible choice. What are people... You're mad at Nick for something? Were you low-key disappointed in Nick when he switched up and talked about getting a gas car on the podcast? No, I was just happy to be talking with Nick. I mean, I'm disappointed that an EV can't fit his current lifestyle, because I would love to keep talking about EVs with him, but I'm not disappointed in him. I'm just disappointed that there's not really an EV that suits him. But no, he loves what he's doing. I'm happy for him. He loves being a part of Starbase, and he loves photography. As long as I've known him, he's always been really into photography and, photo editing, and the fact that he's found a job and a career that lets him pursue that, I'm very, very happy for him. I'm a little bit sad that I don't get to talk to him as much because he has a hard time making time for the podcasts, and I miss having him on there every week. But no, it's not disappointment in him. He can choose what fits his lifestyle best, and unfortunately that's just not an EV that works for him best right now. I'll happily fly to Austin and drive my Cybertruck back to Ohio for early delivery. Only in Ohio, right? No, I know people have asked that on the earnings calls, Logan. The problem is I think way too many people would do that, so it doesn't really solve the problem. If Tesla has an option in the order page that says, are you willing to pick up your Cybertruck in Texas? Probably 60% of the reservations are going to say yes. And then it's like, okay, so we're going to have 40,000 people ready to accept delivery. Do we want that big a crowd? Basically, we're going to still have to say, only a very slow number of people are going to be able to accept delivery because they're not going to build that many Cybertrucks at first. So with that being the case, I don't think it would make sense to have an option at maybe if you're going to do a staggered rollout anyway, instead of telling people, where's your delivery location, you just say, hey, we'll email you when it's ready for pickup at Giga Texas, but you have to come get it. That's a Tesla thing to do, right? We don't want to ship the Cybertruck. That's going to take too long. That's going to be too much energy. But ultimately, the people who are willing to pick it up in Texas, that would still outnumber the number of Cybertrucks there are. So I think they'll ultimately just base it off of your Tesla account address or something, or if they have proof of your license or something, like everybody who ordered a Cybertruck and your account has your driver's license and it says you're a Texas driver, then they'll prioritize those orders or something. You're the proof in the pudding, Drew. Not many threes going to your area, so why provide a shipment of cars to that region when there's a bunch of people in Denver waiting for a rear-wheel drive Model 3? Cybertruck will follow. That's right. It's expectations. You got to understand. If your expectations are out of check, you're going to be disappointed. If you understand the context and why Tesla does what they do, you won't be disappointed. You'll understand the motivation behind it. So that's what I'm trying to do with my videos. They should meet in the middle and provide a 400-mile range Cybertruck. If you're going to have a back order anyway, why bother? You'd build a lot less trucks. You couldn't build trucks as fast if you mandated 400 miles, but I could be wrong. Maybe Tesla will just decide, hey, this is Elon's baby. Elon really, really wants this Cybertruck to have 400 miles of range, and we got to give the Techno King what he wants. Who cares if that slows down our production rate? Let's just do it because it's got to be good at towing, I guess. They could do that. That's possible. I just don't think it's very likely based on their past behavior. They could have done the Plaid Plus Model S with 500 miles of range. A lot of people wanted that one. Lots of people were ordering it. Didn't happen. They said, nah, not good enough. Or not. They didn't say not good enough. They said the regular Plaid is good enough. 350 miles of range is fine. Most people don't need to go further than that anyway. They could use the same argument with the Cybertruck. As long as there's a demand backlog, there's very little reason to incentivize the range. I mean, we don't have proof that 300-mile range pickup trucks don't sell. Look at Ford, look at Rivian, look at Hummer. All those trucks sell like crazy. Everybody's buying them, and they're all paying six figures for them, secondhand at least. Rivian, technically, most of the vehicles are sub 100K, but that's just because Rivian's just trying to be nice and honor the reservation price as best they can. But if you look up any Rivian R1T secondhand, they're all six figures. They're all over 100K, and usually a lot. They're usually 120, 130, $140,000 to get a Rivian without a wait. So Cybertruck I expect to be no different because it will still be, no matter what the range is, 300 miles, even if it's 250 miles. It's the only electric truck with supercharging access. It's the only one. And if your argument is, well, we need that range because the towing with a Cybertruck, even if it has 500 miles of range, is not going to be easy because superchargers are not made for trucks with trailers. They're just now starting to install a few superchargers that have pull-through stands, but the vast majority of them don't. So you're going to have a headache towing with an electric pickup truck for the near-term future, regardless of range. So I think Tesla's just going to take the L on that one and accept, okay, if you do a lot of cross-country towing with your pickup truck, maybe the Cybertruck's not right for you at this time. In the future, when there's more pull-through stations and there's more batteries to pull from, because we don't have that many batteries yet, it'll make more sense to do a longer range, 500-mile range Cybertruck. But right now, 300 is probably going to cover it. Having Cybertrucks and Apteras on the road will feel like a weird sci-fi movie. That's a good point. Mike from Tesla Truck Club made this concept art of the Aptera and the Cybertruck driving on the freeway together. It's just, I love it. It's so cool. Is Autopilot the best semi-truck driver feature? Autopilot does well on the freeway, and I would imagine a substantial decrease in driver fatigue. Yeah, it's got to be better than anything else out there. Although I'm concerned about the phantom braking. Phantom braking on a semi? Oh, that'd be bad. Especially if there were people tailing you from behind. Yeah, that'd be sketchy. Would there be another line for dual versus single line? Maybe just have same line and don't install front motors? Yeah, the wiring's different still. It's not the same. I don't think it's as simple as just don't install one. You got to put a whole different, axle in there. Why would there be another line for dual versus single? I'm pretty sure that, well, the chemistries are different, and I think most of the time people have said that the dual motor would have lower range, so you'd have to assemble different battery packs, which means different weight distribution, different structural pieces, varying weight. No, I just think Tesla wants to keep it as simple as possible, so it's just going to be one size fits all. And they'll just adjust the price because they can do that virtually. They don't have to change anything on the assembly line. If there's a demand problem with Cybertrucks, which I genuinely don't believe there will be for many, many years, they can just lower the price because it's super cheap to build. Tri-motor Cybertruck will not be canceled because the semi is basically the testing mule for how well that works. The semi's not off-roading, though. The semi doesn't have rear-wheel steering. Elon's more recently said the Cybertruck will be quad motor. The semi more recently has said they'll be tri-motor, but they haven't said that about the Cybertruck. I think they're just reusing a lot of the plaid powertrain from the Model S and X to optimize for the semi, but I don't think that means the semi and the Cybertruck have to use. The semi also uses 2170 cells. The semi also has paint. The semi has a full steering wheel. It's not the same. I wouldn't compare the semi powertrain to the Cybertruck powertrain. I don't think they go hand in hand. They're for very different purposes. The semi is going to have a megawatt hour battery pack to work with. The Cybertruck's going to be like maybe 180, probably less. Super Cruise on a semi would be better. Yeah, that way they don't have to use their hands. Truck driver has 80,000 pounds behind him and he just lets his hands go up. At least adaptive cruise control would be an improvement. I don't know what they have now, but did Tesla time the price drop correctly in China to maximize local deliveries just prior to incentive expiring? Strategic pricing putting the pressure on Chinese customers? Probably. Tesla China's smart. That sounds logical to me, that they would try to price it in a way that you qualify for the credits and then everybody has a big surge in orders. Yeah, why wouldn't you? I'm forced to pick up and service a Tesla out of state anyways, so there you go. I think that Tesla could make a factory in Ontario, Canada because of the minerals that they'd be used for producing batteries. Look up the Ring of Fire in Ontario. The thing you want to look for is what the cheapest cost of operations are. So even if you're closer to the materials, if the minimum wage is much higher, or it's more mandated that all the workers have to be unionized or something, Tesla's less likely to do it. I'm not making a statement on unions. I'm just saying Tesla's picked Austin for very specific reasons. And it was not just for the barbecue. They knew they could pay people less, and they knew that it was less likely to unionize. So that incentivizes Tesla that it's going to be cheaper to operate there. And you're going to have to, even if the materials are all there, you're going to have to ship all those cars elsewhere because Canada's not a very large car market. It's just not a large market, period, because there's not that many people there. Semi is closer to a S and Y than a Cybertruck. Who would have thought? Yeah, I mean, I guess they both have armored glass, but yeah, that's about it. Let's see. Someone asked earlier what my thoughts were on the Rivian versus the Cybertruck. I think if money was not a factor, the Cybertruck is probably a better vehicle, but if you're asking what I would be more likely to buy, the Rivian is probably going to be cheaper than the Cybertruck. That's my guess. Specifically because Rivian's making a dual motor LFP version, and I don't think the Cybertruck's going to have that. I think the Cybertruck's in Model S and X tier position right now. It's going to just continue to be six figures or slightly below, maybe $80,000 one day. But no, the market is just too widely addressed. I don't think Tesla could build enough trucks if they priced it super low. Rivian is new kid on the block. Not as big a brand following yet, at least now. But Rivian is at least starting out with pickup trucks, and that's their forte. So they probably want to have a wide range of pickup trucks for people to choose from. Whereas Tesla, their wide range of vehicles is already outselling everybody, and the Cybertruck's just going to be entering that next year. Maybe Giga Mexico, but I don't know if there's all their car factories there, and there's a lot of people there, but I don't know how many of them are buying vehicles that are priced the way Teslas are priced. So I still think you should just go in order of largest addressable market. And Japan is the fourth largest car market. So build factories where most of your people are buying cars. That makes the most sense to me. So I'd say Giga Japan, and then maybe something in South America, or probably another factory in the U.S. You could have three. One on the West Coast, one in the middle, one on the East Coast. That way you have the least amount of distance traveled for delivering vehicles. Which would I pick, R1T or R1S? I like the R1S too. I've never checked one out, but I like the concept of a 7-seater. Although I don't run into situations where I need a 7-seater. I guess the R1T. I like the gear tunnel. That's what bums me out the most about the R1S is there's no gear tunnel, which is kind of I get why it doesn't, but still. Right now, Cybertruck's only selling point for me is the durable exterior and supercharging access along with good software. R1T has all the tools and features that I'm excited for in a pickup. I agree. As far as the one thing I might prefer the Rivian over than the Cybertruck, regardless of price, is the size. I'm not a big fan of driving big trucks, and I have driven a lot of big trucks in my life. I'm just not, I don't like the feeling. I don't like feeling big and bulky and like I can barely see anything. I haven't driven the Cybertruck. Maybe it doesn't feel as big when you're inside it and you've got all the cameras and everything. It won't have park assist maybe on launch. I don't know. Maybe that occupancy network will be ready by then. But the Rivian, from my experience, checking them out, sitting inside them and looking through the gear tunnel in the bed, that's the size of a pickup truck I'm comfortable with. I prefer that smaller design. It's easier to park. It fits in more spaces. And I still think the Cybertruck looks cooler, but I still love the look of the Rivian. And I prefer the Cybertruck interior, although both are good. I like having the landscape display. I like that the Rivian has the rear-facing display for the backseat passengers. But I still love the yoke. The Cybertruck interior is still like peak interior for me. It's just yoke, big 17-inch display, countertop. Just a countertop across the top. How do you feel about the canceled bed cover on the R1T? It's sad, but I think they rushed it. I don't know why they were mass producing them like that when almost all of them were breaking. So many people were having issues with the tonneau cover. I was like, well, if you can't figure it out, don't just mass produce it and assume you'll figure out a fix later, because that's what they were doing. They emailed people and they were like, we understand your tonneau cover's broken. We will let you know when we come up with a fix for it. It's like, yeah, it'd probably be better to just not have a tonneau cover at that point and maybe sell a basic aftermarket one that you can lift up, just like a normal tonneau cover. Wonder if it's possible to swap the CCS port for a Tesla port. Not easily. There's some big, bulky wirings behind those ports. But no, I still think they're both very good trucks. The biggest downside of the Rivian, in my opinion, is the charging network. Aside from that, it has paint. I like a paintless truck. Like the exoskeleton looks cool, but luckily I don't need a truck, so I don't have to make this decision. I can just admire both and appreciate them for what they are. But I don't need a driver display either. The Rivian has that speedometer behind the steering wheel. I don't need that. And Rivian's a little too logo heavy for me. They kind of plaster their name and logo everywhere. I kind of am like, okay, we get it. You're a Rivian. I have seen the electric Dodge Charger and I don't like it. Don't make noise. Cars don't need to make noise. Let's see. Have all the Michigan Cybertruck folks come down, flood the state with the OEM. That'd be right. Let me see. I think I read that. With all the auto manufacturers offering an electric car and more to come, I think Tesla charging network will open up to all EVs, and we may see additional offerings for more stations. That's not a prediction. Tesla has said that. Tesla has said on the record they will open up the superchargers, but it's not going to be all of them. What we can tell from Tesla's filings and the way Tesla shows they show a supercharger map that says this is an existing one and this is a non-Tesla supercharger coming soon. It will be new supercharging stations that haven't been installed yet. But I think the first one's going to be somewhere in Arizona. I did a video on that a while back. But there will be new superchargers that have something called a Magic Dock, where if you're a CCS vehicle, you pull out the cable and it'll be a CCS port. Or if you're a Tesla, you'll pull out the cable and it'll be a Tesla connector. So you won't have an adapter. Tesla's not going to sell an adapter because the current supercharging, 99% of the existing supercharging network is all built for EVs that have the charge port on the driver rear side. And if you started charging Rivians there, the cable's not long enough. Even if you sold a Tesla to CCS adapter, the Rivian would take up multiple stalls, or the Porsche or the Lucid or whatever you charge at the supercharger, it would not fit, or the cable would not be long enough, or you'd have to park differently in a way that wouldn't work. So it's going to be new charging stations. Basically, V4 superchargers will be open to non-Teslas, but that does not mean that the tens of thousands of existing superchargers are going to be open to non-Teslas, which is, I think, a big misunderstanding a lot of people have. They're like, well, soon Rivian will be able to charge its superchargers too. It's like, well, technically, but it'll only be a handful at first. And once Rivian once Rivian is built out their adventure network to make it almost as commonly placed as superchargers, then I wouldn't be so worried about buying a Rivian in the future. If I do need a pickup truck for some reason, I don't need one right now, and I don't foresee myself ever needing one. But if for some reason in the future I did, I would feel a lot more comfortable if the adventure network had a few hundred locations across the country that were in routes that I saw myself going to, because I don't want to just rely on Electrify America. I don't think that's a good plan based on the experiences I've seen. Not reliable, and I have a lot more faith in the Charger when the same company designed the vehicle and the stall at the same time. Maybe if I might get lucky in my area, we'll get a V4 station. Glad I found at least 500 other people want a station in my area. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I voted as well. You can vote for new supercharger locations, but I'm going to do this all day if I'm not careful. I got some more. You guys are inspiring me. I got to make some more Cybertruck content today. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for tuning in. I had an excellent time. I loved your questions, and thank you for your super chats. Sorry if I missed them. I'll be in Discord if you want more direct responses. But thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.